Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a world of powdered wigs, velvet gowns, and body odour so intense it could dethrone a monarch. You're about to step into the perfumed yet putrid chambers of medieval royalty, where soap was scarce, fleas were common, and queens reigned with grime beneath their jewelled crowns. It's the side of history they definitely don't show you in the movies. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop a comment with your city and the time you're listening. I want to know who's falling asleep to medieval hygiene horror stories from halfway across the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've just arrived at court, you're not just visiting, you're the queen. Congratulations, don't get too excited. The moment you step into your new chambers, you're hit with a smell that defies description. It's not a single odour, but a complex fugue of damp fabric, rotting herbs, candle smoke, and something that might be goat. You breathe through your mouth, which helps until you realise even the air tastes a bit like mildew and old mutton. The grand tapestries, woven with golden thread and decades of dust, don't absorb the smell, they trap it, marinate it, and release it whenever someone opens a window. This isn't just a bad day in the palace, this is the status quo. Hygiene in this medieval royal court is a distant second to appearances and ritual. You're surrounded by brocade and silk, but beneath all the glittering ceremony is a lack of bathing that would make a modern camping trip seem luxurious. You think back to your last bath, if you can call it that. It wasn't the warm, candlelit soak you'd expect, no. It was more like an uncomfortable processional. Servants hauling heavy buckets of tepid water from the kitchens, filling a wooden tub that's been used by others that week, and possibly their dogs, while a chambermaid scrubs your back with something that feels suspiciously like a horsebrush. And that was on a good day. Bathing here is a rare event, more ceremonial than hygienic. Too much exposure to water is believed to make the skin vulnerable to disease. That's right, people think being clean might actually kill you. So instead, everyone leans heavily into olfactory illusions. The queen, you, are expected to spritz rose water on your linens and wear perfumed pouches tied around your waist, neck, or even sewn into your underclothes. Unfortunately, the scent of roses can only do so much when your underlayers haven't been washed in a month and your room is heated by a brazier full of burning dung cakes. The courtiers, of course, pretend not to notice. They glide around you in layers of musty finery, sniffing delicately behind their hands if someone passes too close with a particularly eye-watering scent trail. You quickly learn the silent social code. Never speak of the stench, never act as if anything is amiss, and above all, pretend that everything smells faintly of lilies. No one dares contradict the fantasy. After all, if the queen reeks of sweat and mothballs, what does that say about the divine right of kings? And here's the kicker, no one actually knows what clean is supposed to feel like. There's no cultural baseline, you've grown up in this. If you can smell yourself, it's already too late. You simply adjust to the slow accumulation of grime. Each layer of clothing becomes a barrier between your skin and the rest of the world. Though ironically, it also helps trap in the body heat and sweat that starts the whole cycle over again. You walk through the royal chambers, your slippers squelching slightly from the dampness clinging to the rushes spread over the stone floor. These straw and herb coverings are supposed to soak up spills and mask odours. Instead, they mostly just ferment underfoot. Every so often someone throws down new rushes, but no one removes the old ones. They simply pile on top of what's already rotting below. It's like building a compost heap. Inside, as you glide past a line of bowing ladies in waiting, one of them dares to peer at you. She's missing a few teeth, probably from using crushed charcoal as toothpaste. You'll get used to that too, blackened gums and all, but that's for another night. For now, your nose is your enemy. Every breath reminds you that this world, this elegant, deadly dance of silks and smells, is far from the pristine fairy tale you might have expected. You're not just wearing a crown, you're wearing centuries of superstition, ritual, and questionable hygiene habits. And somewhere, deep in the middle of it all, is the part you can't stop thinking about. This isn't even considered bad. In fact, it's normal, expected, even holy. There's a theory floating around among the bishops that saintliness smells sweet, and some royal deaths are later interpreted as divine if the body doesn't reek right away. It's a low bar, but it explains a lot about the people still believing they're closer to God when they smell like a cheese wheel left in the sun. So yes, you're the queen now. You wear a gown laced with gold, a crown that pinches behind your ears, and a perfume that's doing far too much work for far too little effect. You reign over a kingdom of nobles, clergy and chamber pots, and if you're lucky, maybe you'll get another bath before winter. But probably not. So here's the thing they don't tell you when you marry into royalty. Your bath, your precious God-sent bath, isn't something you just take when you feel gross. No. You don't get to just say, I think I'll rinse the filth off my body today. Oh no, my crowned friend, bathing is a logistical operation. A performance even. You'd have an easier time organising a diplomatic summit than slipping into a tub of warm water. There are servants to summon, hot coals to heat, buckets to carry up spiral staircases, curtains to draw, linens to air out, and an entire royal schedule to rearrange just so your toes can touch lukewarm water. And that's assuming you're even allowed to bathe. Yes, allowed. Because in medieval royal households, bathing isn't just a physical act, it's a medical and political decision. If the stars aren't aligned right, or your physician insists your humours are a little imbalanced, you may be politely advised to abstain. You might have a raging case of melancholic bile, which is apparently worsened by steam, or maybe Mars is in retrograde. Honey, you're in your childbearing years. So no bath for you, lest you anger the planets and miscarry a future heir. Gotta keep those wombs warm and dry like a medieval spice rack. Even if you're healthy and desperate enough to demand a bath, it still has to be scheduled around royal duties. You're expected to hear petitions, attend mass, and listen to 6 hours of some cousin droning on about their estate problems before anyone starts prepping the tub. And what a tub it is! A wooden barrel lined with linen, no drain, no privacy, and no illusions. As queen, you won't be alone. There will be attendants bustling around, pouring water over your shoulders with solemn reverence like you're being baptized into discomfort. One poor girl will stand at your feet the entire time, with a fan made from goose feathers to wave the steam out of your eyes and the stench out of the room. She'll fail on both counts. And the water, it is never hot enough. First bucket might be if you're lucky, but by the time the last one sloshes in, the temperature is somewhere between pond in April and drinkable ale. The soap is lye-based and harsh, assuming you even get soap. More often you're offered a bowl of grainy sand and stale herbs to scrub with. Exfoliation, but make it medieval. You emerge raw, goose-pimpled, and somehow smelling more like a winter stew than a person. And yet everyone acts like you've just walked out of a perfume ad. What's wild is that these royal bathing events were once seen as acts of luxury, signs of wealth. In earlier centuries, especially during the early medieval period, public bathhouses existed and people, yes, even nobles, used them. But over time, fear of disease and moral suspicion crept in. Bathhouses became associated with sin, sex, and plague, and suddenly, soaking in a communal tub meant you were either dying, promiscuous, or both. The upper class distanced themselves from it, ironically choosing to wallow in private filth instead. Because, morals, this shift leaves you, as queen, stuck in a strange middle ground. You're technically above public bathing, but also heavily discouraged from indulging in frequent private ones. And when you do finally bathe, it's as much for show as it is for sanitation. There's almost always an audience. Maybe a few attendants, a noblewoman who won't stop talking about her embroidery, and, if you're really blessed, your court physician who insists on observing to monitor your bodily response. Which is medieval doctor speak for, I'm guessing wildly and watching to see what happens. There's also a religious layer to this whole mess. In some circles, especially in the later Middle Ages, bathing was seen as a slippery slope to vanity. You wash too often, you must think you're too beautiful. Or worse, you might get ideas. Cleanliness, they say, leads to pride, and pride is the devil's footstool. So instead of scrubbing up, you're encouraged to purify the soul and just let the body marinate. Spiritual hygiene over physical hygiene. A dangerous trade-off if you ask the part of you currently itching under 4 layers of wool. Speaking of wool, did I mention how all your robes and undergarments trap heat like you're trying to bake yourself alive? Even in winter, the combination of layers, firelit halls, and a complete lack of ventilation means you're perpetually sweating. That sweat gets absorbed into your chemise, then into your surcoat, then into your gown, and then it just stays there, forever, or until some servant finally peels the fabric off and buries it at the bottom of the laundry heap, praying no one asked them to clean it again this month. And let's take a moment to appreciate how the other royals handle bathing. A famous example, Queen Isabel of Castile allegedly bragged that she had only bathed twice in her life, once at birth and once before her wedding. Now, whether that's entirely true or just apocryphal chest-thumping is debated among scholars, but the fact that this was considered bragworthy says everything. In her time, infrequent bathing was associated with piety and restraint. She wasn't dirty, she was devout. Still, not all queens followed the filth gospel. Some, like Eleanor of Aquitaine, reportedly enjoyed warm baths infused with herbs and oils, but again, those were exceptional cases, and even then, enjoyed is a relative term. You might love the smell of lavender, but it can't do much against a month's worth of bodily stew. So you learn quickly, your body isn't really yours. It's a canvas for the public display, a vessel for political airs, and a spiritual metaphor. Your personal comfort, somewhere between afterthought and potential scandal, and if you dare ask for a third bath in one season, you risk a full-blown theological debate. By the end of your second month as queen, you start fantasizing about clean cotton sheets, fresh water and privacy, not jewels, not feasts, just 5 minutes alone in a hot tub with a bar of actual soap and no one watching. But that's a fantasy for another life. For now, you get to sit on your throne, damp, perfumed and piously unwashed, while everyone bows and tells you how radiant you look. They're lying, of course, but in this court lying is the most hygienic thing anyone does. It doesn't take long before you realise that in this royal life, smelling good has almost nothing to do with being clean. If cleanliness is the dream, perfume is the duct tape solution everyone's been sold. And so, every morning, just after you're reluctantly peeled out of a sweat-crusted shift and your hair is fluffed into something vaguely resembling nobility, you're doused, absolutely drenched in perfume. Not a spritz, not a dab behind the ears. We're talking full floral assault. Your attendants sprinkle rose water on your underclothes, lavender water in your hair, and something sharp and citrusy on your feet to ward off evil humours. Evil humours and toe rot, probably. And then there's the sachets. Little fabric pouches filled with dried herbs and powdered flowers, tied around your waist or slipped into your sleeves. They jangle softly as you walk, releasing a steady puff of aroma like some passive-aggressive air freshener. You've got one tucked in your corset so high it practically pokes your chin when you sit. But don't remove it. Heaven forbid your natural scent wafts through the Great Hall. That's how you end up being whispered about during Mass, and not in the reverent, she must be favoured by God kind of way. Still, the perfumes are less about you and more about the court itself. Everyone stinks. Everyone. Servants, nobles, bishops, even the king, especially the king. But it's more acceptable to disguise the stench than to wash it off. Perfume is part of the armour of royalty. You're not masking a problem, you're announcing status. The peasants can keep their rivers and their outdoor baths, you smell like crushed violets and decaying lilacs baked into a garment that hasn't seen fresh air since the last solar eclipse. And it's not just florals. Some of the more adventurous perfumers offer you oils infused with musk, scraped from the glands of wild animals, and ambergris, which is whale vomit. Yes, whale vomit. A clump of it once washed up on a beach, someone sniffed it, said, earthy. And the rest is history. It's rare, expensive, and now it's part of your daily toilette. You rub it behind your ears and hope no one realises you're basically seasoning yourself like a medieval roast. The irony, of course, is that all these perfumes, oils and scented waters mix together into an olfactory soup that hovers over court life like an invisible fog. The longer you're in it, the less you notice. But when a visitor from a cleaner, or just different, land enters your orbit, they blink hard, try not to cough, and you know they're thinking it. This queen smells like a funeral bouquet left in the sun, but no one dares say it out loud. Not unless they want to be banished from your inner circle or sent off to pray about it in a drafty monastery for 6 months. What's truly tragic is how much this entire routine hinges on myth. People believed that foul smells were dangerous, not just offensive, but medically dangerous. According to the prevailing theory of miasma, or bad air, odours could carry disease, so the logic went. Surround yourself with good smells and you'll be protected. That's why you have a small nosegay, an actual bundle of herbs dangling from your belt. Not because it's pretty, but because you might walk past someone sick and catch their illness through your nostrils. One sniff too deep and boom, you're coughing blood in a week. Medieval science is deeply comforting like that. There are even perfumes made specifically for protection. Your apothecary once presented you with a custom blend of cinnamon, clove, and vinegar that smelled like a Christmas dessert gone horribly wrong. You wore it for 3 days until the king made a face and muttered something about sausages. It's now reserved for plague season, or when you really want to clear a room. Of course, perfume has its limits. Sometimes it simply can't win the battle. Like during your monthly bleed, when nothing short of divine intervention is keeping things fresh. Or in the heat of summer, when your layers are soaked and the fabric sticks to you like damp wallpaper. There are moments, long, sweaty, humiliating moments, where you can feel yourself ripening like soft cheese. You start to wonder if people can hear it, the slow fermentation of your royal personhood. If they can smell the stress behind your smiles. But no one says a word, just more perfume. Always more perfume. Now, not all scholars agree on how much perfume was actually used by queens. Some argue it was more symbolic than constant, that scent was saved for ceremonies and feast days. Others think it was a daily ritual, an absolute necessity just to survive court life. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. But when your life is lived shoulder to shoulder with other nobles in rooms that haven't been aired out in years, you start understanding why someone might empty a whole vial of rose oil onto their neck before breakfast. And of course, so you're not the only one suffering. One of your ladies-in-waiting, poor Marguerite, has developed a rash from her jasmine oil. The court physician insists it's just her delicate feminine temperament, which is medieval for, "We have no idea what's happening and don't care. She keeps applying it anyway. Better an itchy rash than being labelled sour-smelling." Once that word gets around, it sticks. There's a duchess who hasn't been called by her real name in years. She's just the one who smelled like turnips. Brutal. So you carry on. Day after day you perform the ritual. The rose water, the sachets, the ambergris, the invisible battle between foulness and florals. Because even if you feel like a walking spice rack that's been left in a rainstorm, you are the queen, and the queen must never stink. At least not without first trying very, very hard to smell like something else. And really, isn't that the most medieval thing of all? Not fixing the problem, just covering it in flowers and pretending everything's fine. You learn early on that your hair is not your own. It belongs to the crown, the court, and whatever parade of stylists, maids, and nervous nobles are standing behind you with combs and nervous hands. Every morning begins with the slow, careful unravelling of your night veil, and then it's time for the real ordeal, taming whatever tangle has formed on your scalp overnight. Your hair hasn't been washed in, well, honestly, you've lost track. Weeks, months, who can say? Washing it isn't routine. It's practically ceremonial. A rare disruptive event that might only happen on a holy day or before a royal portrait. Instead, your ladies-in-waiting rely on the ancient technique of brushing. Vigorous, unrelenting brushing. Long, stiff strokes from root to end, not so much to style as to redistribute the grease and dirt evenly. It's not cleaning, it's blending. If your scalp itches, tough. If it flakes, you pat a little powder into your part and move on. Sometimes they use a scented pomade made from bear fat to keep your curls in place. Bear fat. Apparently nothing says grace and elegance like smelling faintly of woodland carnivore. And let's talk about the combs. These are not the gentle detanglers of modern salons. These are carved, bone-toothed contraptions that double as lice catchers. Lice are not just a nuisance at court, they're practically residents. Everyone has them. It's not a scandal. What is a scandal is scratching your head during an audience with the bishop. So instead, you endure the crawling sensation like a true monarch. Still smiling and internally screaming. There's one lady who specialises in nitpicking, literally. She sits with you once a week under the guise of braiding your hair, but you both know she's inspecting. She moves methodically, parting your strands with a sharp little stick, squinting in candlelight, and muttering things like, "Got one," with alarming satisfaction. When she finds something, it gets squashed between her thumbnails with a faint pop. It's all very dignified. Your hair, once you're brushed and powdered and pinned, is a towering creation of coiled braids, jewelled netting, and sheer architectural ambition. But don't be fooled, beneath that regal display, it's a jungle. A warm, dark habitat full of dust, oils, insects, and whatever that weird twig was you found last week. But it looks good from a distance, and that's what matters. Queens aren't supposed to sweat, scratch, or shed. You just have to hold still and let the scaffolding be built. Some days, you wear a wig. Not because it's easier. Oh no, wigs are worse. They're heavy, they itch, and they're made of someone else's hair, which is somehow both fascinating and horrifying. Sometimes it's horsehair. Sometimes it's the real thing, collected from peasant girls or prisoners, depending on who's available and who's desperate. Once, one of your wigs arrived still damp. You asked why. The maid said, "It was just boiled." You didn't ask for details. Still, wigs are status. They come in colours and styles your natural hair could never achieve. Tall, powdered, ringleted monstrosities that make your neck ache after an hour, but at least they cover up your actual scalp, which, at this point, is more battlefield than canvas. Red patches, bumps, the occasional weeping sore. Thank the saints for veils and ribbons. One courtier swears that rubbing a mixture of vinegar and pigeon droppings into the scalp keeps the sores away. You haven't tried it yet, but let's be honest, you're getting close. The whole hair routine is such an ordeal that it becomes a kind of public performance. Young ladies watch to learn the rituals, older women comment on your shine, and men pretend not to notice while clearly judging whose braids are the tightest. A single lock falling out of place during a banquet can start whispers. She must be ill. She's under stress. Perhaps she's cursed. Yes, because clearly hairpins are a direct line to your psychological state. Historically, queens were judged not just on their political savvy or childbearing capabilities, but also on their grooming, or at least the illusion of it. A well-maintained appearance was supposed to signal discipline, virtue, and divine favour, which is deeply ironic, considering how often your well-maintained hair is hiding signs of infestation. But that's court life. Everyone's pretending. You're all just nobility-shaped onion layers of powder, perfume, and plausible deniability. One of the stranger historical tidbits you pick up is that some queens used to collect the lice combed from their hair and inspect them. Not out of disgust, but curiosity. There were even folk beliefs that lice meant health, that their absence could be a sign of illness. Let that sink in. Having lice was reassuring. A reminder that your body was warm, alive, and producing the kind of scalp conditions conducive to a thriving parasite ecosystem. Comforting. And the weirdest part, you start to adapt. At first you're horrified, then you're resigned, then you're oddly comforted by the routine. You get used to the stiff tug of a comb, the pinch of a bobby pin, the prickly heat of bare fat pomade melting on your scalp. You even start associating the smell of rosemary oil with mornings in your chambers, the sun barely up, the maid yawning behind her hand as she preps your fourth braid. It's disgusting. It's weirdly tender. It's royal life. Not everyone agrees on how bad things really were. Some scholars argue that elite women had more access to oils, clean cloths, and grooming tools than we give them credit for. Others say that the lice and filth were simply tolerated, even normalised, because there were no better options. The truth likely floats somewhere in the middle, just like that one rogue curl that always escapes your headdress no matter how tight they pin it. But historical disagreement doesn't change the sensation of it. The itch you try not to scratch, the heavy pins pressing into your scalp, the faint tickle of movement just behind your ear that you really hope is your imagination. You smile, you wave, you look every inch the polished monarch, and beneath all that, you know, the lice know, but at least your crown sits straight. There's no sugar-coating this next part. You need to talk about your teeth, or more specifically, what medieval queens did instead of taking care of their teeth. Because in this glamorous, plague-adjacent world of velvet and vinegar, dental hygiene is a distant dream. You don't brush, you scrape. You don't floss. You rinse it so occasionally with a solution so acidic it could probably clean rust off a sword. And forget fluoride or toothpaste. Your new daily routine involves a scorched piece of bread, some vinegar, and an alarming amount of prayer. Mornings begin with a light breakfast, maybe some dried fruit, stale bread, and wine that's only mildly suspicious. Then it's time to cleanse the mouth, which in royal terms means rubbing a cloth soaked in wine or vinegar along your teeth and gums. The idea is that the acidity will kill whatever's lurking in there, which is both hopeful and horrifying. It stings, of course. Everything stings. Sometimes you use salt instead, just a pinch scrubbed across the enamel, with a coarse rag while one of your attendants stands by pretending not to gag at the smell coming off your breath. The most common tool at your disposal is a toothstick, a thin twig chewed at one end until the fibres fray into bristles. You pick food out from between your teeth with it, scrape the surface a bit, and try not to flinch when the wood pokes a tender gum pocket. If you're feeling fancy, your stick might be dipped in mint oil or rosemary water, but most days it's just you and a sad little branch trying to do battle against the medieval mouth demons. You don't know what a cavity is yet, not really, but you know something is wrong when chewing feels like punishment. Queens, despite their wealth and velvet-trimmed diets, are not immune to tooth decay. In fact, their access to sweets, honeyed cakes, sugared almonds, fruit preserved in syrup, only speeds up the destruction. You're basically speedrunning dental collapse in the name of luxury. And when something inevitably starts to rot, well, you have options. Terrible, scream-inducing options. One involves cauterization. Yes, fire. Your court physician might recommend holding a hot iron near the tooth to drive out the pain demons. Or you might get a clove-stuffed poultice pressed against your cheek, held in place by a strip of linen that makes you look like you lost a bar fight with a pastry. In the worst cases, the tooth has to come out. No anesthesia, no numbing, just a metal tool, brute force, and a whole lot of screaming. The extractions are done in your chambers, where the acoustics do not flatter the situation. You've walked past more than one lady-in-waiting being held down mid-yank, and now you understand why older queens all have that tight-lipped, vaguely haunted expression. It's not dignity, it's dental trauma. One of the weirder beliefs is that rubbing powdered herbs or crushed gemstones on your teeth can make them whiter. Some queens keep a little pouch of ground pearls or coral which they mix with vinegar into a gritty paste and smear across their teeth before banquets. It works, sort of, if you don't mind destroying your enamel in the process. There's also the charcoal method. Burn bread until it's basically ash, mix it with a little honey, and rub it on your teeth like medieval crest. It leaves your mouth black, your gums bleeding, and your smile somewhere between charming and haunting. And then there's the breath problem. Royal courts are intimate places. You're expected to stand close during conversation, whisper secrets, laugh politely. But your breath? It's doing its own thing. Some queens chew cloves or fennel seeds to freshen it, or hold tiny sachets of mint under their tongue before public appearances. You've even seen someone chew on parsley like a grazing rabbit right before a procession. At this point, you're not judging. You're taking notes. One of your older chambermaids, she's missing most of her teeth but has opinions, insists that rinsing with warm wine and crushed sage will keep your gums strong. You try it. The wine stings, the sage sticks in your molars, and your breath smells like a tavern herb garden. But she seems pleased. Apparently your mouth is now well balanced, whatever that means. Of course, none of this really works, not long term. You've already noticed some of your gums receding, a bit of blood when you bite into anything harder than cheese, and a molar that feels loose. You try not to think about it. After all, royal portraits are painted with closed lips for a reason. There's also a strange but persistent belief that keeping the head cool is essential to dental health. If you overheat, the theory goes, your teeth will loosen. So on especially warm days, you're instructed to sit with a damp cloth wrapped around your temples, staring out the window like a melancholic statue, while your mouth slowly marinates in vinegar and regret. Some scholars today argue that dental hygiene wasn't entirely non-existent among royals. There's evidence of early toothbrush-like tools, mouth rinses, and herbal treatments being passed around the courts. But even the best-case scenarios involved more abrasion than care, more ritual than result. And if you managed to keep most of your teeth into old age, you were either wildly lucky or blessed by a saint with a dental specialty. Still, somehow, you're expected to smile. A royal smile is political. It's used at weddings, at feasts, during alliances and betrayals. But now you understand why so many medieval queens painted their lips and kept them tightly shut. Red lips distract from blackened teeth. A controlled smile hides everything else. You're not just managing your kingdom, you're managing the slow visible collapse of your mouth and doing it with grace. It's a strange thing, this battle with your own breath. You can handle the robes, the rituals, the lice, barely. But this feels personal. Every word, every bite, every forced grin reminds you that inside your jeweled head, things are decaying, quietly, relentlessly. Still, tomorrow morning you'll chew your fennel seeds, rinse with vinegar, and smile like you're not one pastry away from total molar mutiny. Because you're the queen, and queens do not whimper over wobbly teeth. It's late at night when the reality of your royal bed finally sinks in, and not in the dreamy, silken, rose-petal way you once imagined. The bed looks magnificent, of course. It towers like a sage, with carved posts that reach toward the ceiling, draped in heavy brocade and woven hangings that depict knights, saints, and oddly cheerful lions. There are at least 3 feather-stuffed mattresses layered over one another, and the pillows are so numerous you could lose a small dog in them. It's a throne you sleep on, basically, a declaration of wealth and status, but then you climb into it. You immediately regret it. The warmth hits first. Stuffy, oppressive, the kind that doesn't feel cozy so much as stale. The bed hangings that looked so regal in daylight now serve as a barrier against airflow, trapping in every bit of heat, sweat, and whatever lived in here before you. The linen sheets cling to your skin, not from softness, but from dampness, like they've absorbed centuries of royal perspiration and just decided to hold on to it. You're pretty sure the mattress sighs when you lie down, not romantically, but like it's had enough. Then the scratching begins. At first you think it's in your imagination, the faint tickle near your ankle, the little prickle under your knee. But it doesn't stop. You shift, you roll, the tickling follows, and soon it becomes clear you're not alone in this bed, not by a long shot. You share it with a whole civilization of uninvited guests, mites, fleas, and the occasional louse that's taken a detour from your scalp. They live in the seams of the sheets, in the wool stuffing, deep in the creases of the pillows. They're survivors, champions of the royal ecosystem, and they're hungry. It doesn't help that bathing is rare. Laundry is rarer, and your chambermaids believe that airing the bedding in sunlight will steal its warmth. The bedclothes are changed seasonally, if that. More often they're simply dusted off, beaten with sticks, or spritzed with rose water in an attempt to revive them. But you know better. No amount of floral mist is hiding the musty undertone of human decay. You roll over and breathe through your mouth, wondering if you should start naming the flea bites or just surrender to the itch. It wasn't always like this. In earlier centuries, shared beds were the norm, even for nobles. It was considered a sign of status to have a bed so large that you could accommodate visitors, courtiers, or even your own children on chilly nights. Queens often slept with their ladies-in-waiting nearby, or even beside them, especially during travel when accommodations were tight and privacy was a distant dream. On paper, it sounds sweet, like a slumber party with tiaras. In practice, it means more bodies, more sweat, more hair, and way more fleas. You remember once sleeping beside a visiting duchess whose perfume was so thick it made your nose sting. She snored like a boar in distress and hogged the covers with the entitlement of a woman who believed God had personally granted her the gift of warmth. You didn't sleep. You stared at the ceiling and tried not to panic every time something rustled in the straw-packed floor beneath you. Even in your own chambers. With a private bed and silk-embroidered pillows, you're never really alone. The lice follow you from your hair to the pillowcase. The fleas live in the floor rushes and leap onto the mattress like it's feeding time. And then there are the mice, bold little things that scurry across your floor at night, nibbling on crumbs left from your last bed snack, which is apparently a thing you're expected to do. Small pies, soft cheese, honeyed nuts. All of it left sitting out on silver trays as a symbol of abundance, and none of it ever completely eaten. The mice love it. You pretend not to notice. Your chambermaids do try, bless them. They hang bundles of dried lavender at the bedposts, sprinkle crushed mint around the mattress, and burn sage in the evenings to purify the space. All lovely gestures. None of them stop the biting. Once, in a fit of quiet desperation, you tried to sleep standing up. Just for a few minutes, against a wall. You got a cramp in your foot and startled a candle holder off the table. After that, you resigned yourself to the bed and all its scratchy truths. Now and then, rumours circulate about royal cures for bed pests. Some queens sleep with garlic under the mattress. Others swear by spreading a paste of vinegar and ash around the edges of the bed frame to repel insects. You even heard of one who ordered her mattress to be stuffed with dried marigolds and wormwood, both said to drive away fleas. The next morning she woke up with a rash and a swollen eye. So, maybe not. Then there's the bedding itself. Your sheets are technically made from fine linen, which sounds fancy, until you realise they've been used so many times they've taken on the texture of aged parchment. Your blankets are wool, thick and heavy, which is cosy until they absorb every drop of sweat your body produces over the course of the night and become soggy with history. Washing them requires hauling them to the river and beating them with wooden paddles. So, that doesn't happen often. And don't get too romantic about the canopy. Sure, it's meant to be a symbol of wealth and grandeur, but it's also a dust trap. You once sneezed so hard beneath it that your ladies spent an hour inspecting the tapestry for signs of divine communication. It was just pollen, or possibly rat dander. Either way, it didn't come with a miracle. There is one comfort: the bed warmer. A brass pan filled with hot coals slid between the sheets before you lie down. It adds a bit of heat, sure, but mostly it just creates little pockets of warm dampness where bacteria can throw parties. It's like you're preparing a stew, and you are the meat. Some historians debate how truly miserable royal bedding was. There's evidence that noble households tried to maintain standards, changing linens during holy festivals, rotating mattresses, employing full-time laundresses. But even with those best efforts, you're still dealing with medieval standards in a world without proper soap, hot running water, or pest control. And despite all the splendour, all the embroidery and velvet and gold thread, your bed is just another place where discomfort hides behind grandeur. You try not to think too hard about it as you lie there, wrapped in your embroidered cocoon of itch. You focus on the creak of the wooden frame, the gentle flap of a tapestry in the breeze, the soft scurrying of something beneath the floorboards. It's not smooth, but it's close. And if you don't move too much, if you breathe slowly, you can almost pretend that this bed is fit for a queen. Almost. Every morning, your chambermaids bring out what they call your fresh clothes, which is a bold statement considering nothing you own has seen water in weeks, sometimes months. These so-called fresh garments are not laundered in the way you'd hope. No scrubbing, no steaming, and certainly no soapy rinse in a bubbling tub. Instead, your dresses are carefully brushed, aired out near an open window if the weather allows, and then dusted with powders and sprinkled with perfume to mask the odour of long-dead sweat. Then, layer by layer, the royal armour is assembled. It starts with the chemise, a long underdress made of linen, usually the only layer that sees anything close to regular washing. But regular is generous. You're lucky if it gets cleaned once every couple of weeks, and only then if it's visibly soiled or starting to stiffen from accumulated body oils. Over that goes your kirtle, another gown, heavier, darker, and utterly unforgiving when it comes to breathability. The final layer is your outer dress, usually velvet, brocade, or some other elaborate fabric that looks regal, and traps heat like you're being slow roasted for dinner. You don't just wear clothes, you layer them. You swaddle yourself in yards of fabric, some of it lined with fur, some bejewelled, most of it riddled with threads of old sweat and the occasional smudge of something you can't quite identify. The combined weight can make you feel like you're dragging a woolen curtain across the castle. You start to understand why royalty doesn't move much. It's not poise, it's survival. A sudden sprint could lead to collapse from heat stroke, and yet changing clothes is rare, really rare. Most of the time, you wear the same gown for days, sometimes weeks on end, especially if you're not expecting to be seen in public. You'll occasionally change out your outer layer to show variety at court functions, but underneath, that same crusty chemise clings loyally to your body. The term second skin comes to mind, but it's more accurate to call it a sour ghost at this point. Why so few wardrobe changes? Well, for one, laundry is labour-intensive. It involves boiling water, scrubbing with lye soap that burns your hands, and drying everything in the sun, weather permitting. Laundresses have to haul heavy garments across castle grounds or down to riverbanks, and the risk of damage is real. Fine fabrics aren't built for medieval laundering. A single wash could ruin a gown worth more than a small farm. So instead, the solution is to not wash. Just rotate, flip the dress inside out, patch it, air it out, layer something new over it. The smell? That's what rosewater and cloves are for, but even the laundering that does happen is questionable. Some shifts are washed in urine. Yes, you heard that right. Stale urine, called chamber lye, is collected in clay pots and used as an early form of ammonia. It's poured onto linens to lift stains and whiten fabrics. There's an entire corner of the castle courtyard that smells like a urinal, and Laundry Line had a very unfortunate baby. Your chemise may be clean, but it definitely doesn't feel like it. And the thought of sleeping in it again that night? Best not to dwell on it. Then there's the corsetry, or what passes for it. Long before the whalebone contraptions of later centuries, you're laced into bodices that constrict your torso and encourage a very specific silhouette. Noble posture, slightly heaving bosom, and an oxygen intake rate appropriate for someone who plans on standing still for the next 8 hours. Bending? Not happening. You once tried to pick up a fallen glove and nearly blacked out, so now you drop things and wait patiently for someone else to pick them up. It's undignified, sure, but fainting in your own filth is somehow worse. And don't forget the headwear. Hennins, veils, sakirs, coiffes, they all have their own place, their own rules, but what they have in common is this. Once they go on, they stay on. Taking off a headdress midday because it's itchy, or because you feel sweat sliding down your scalp like a medieval waterfall? Scandalous. You endure, because queens don't itch. They endure with grace and the occasional well-placed eye twitch. It's almost comical how much effort goes into looking clean without actually being clean. The velvet, the embroidery, the lace trims, all designed to dazzle the eye and distract from the smell. The court is full of people who look like gods and smell like livestock. It's not just accepted, it's expected. To walk into a room smelling like lavender is noble. To walk in smelling like nothing, suspicious. The goal isn't cleanliness, it's illusion. And there's no such thing as a casual royal outfit. Even your nightgown weighs more than most modern coats, and your slippers are stiff, embroidered things that chafe the tops of your feet until they blister. You'd kill for something loose, something breathable. Just one day in a cotton shift that hasn't been steeped in old sweat and holy water. Of course, some queens pushed back. There are tales of women who demanded more frequent changes, lighter fabrics, and even requested that their garments be washed in scented waters rather than chamber lye. But those were the outliers, often regarded as eccentric or overly delicate. The general attitude was, why change the dress when no one is complaining about the smell to your face? And so, you learn to live with the stickiness. With the musty embrace of a gown that's moulded itself to your shape over days of wear, you learn to move slowly, not just out of dignity, but because sudden movement might release a puff of something you'd rather keep trapped. You learn the quiet terror of sitting too close to a fire and wondering if your sweat-slicked hem will start to smoulder. And above all, you learn that in medieval royalty, fashion isn't about expression, it's about suppression. Of your body, your needs, and definitely your nostrils. And yet every morning you stand tall as your maids brush down the creases and tug your sleeves into place. You lift your chin, take a deep breath, immediately regret it, and glide out into court, a walking monument to regal decay. Because filthy or not, a queen must always look the part. No one really prepares you for the moment you learn that urine is part of your beauty routine. Not metaphorically, literally. It's called chamber lye, and it has a proud place in the royal supply closet, right next to rosewater and dried beetles. The first time a maid gently suggests it, you think she's joking. She's not. She's already got the pot. It's warm, and now it's your problem. The logic, you're told, is simple. Stale urine, after it's been sitting around fermenting for a few days, produces ammonia. And ammonia, despite its terrible smell and even worse reputation, has cleaning properties. So yes, your gowns are sometimes rinsed in pee, and your sheets are brightened with it. And, brace yourself, your teeth might be too. A weak solution is swished between the lips to whiten the smile, a phrase that has never felt less appealing. Some even apply it directly to their skin, claiming it brightens the complexion and tightens pores. You now have to live with the knowledge that someone, somewhere, once rubbed queen pee on their face and called it skincare. To make matters worse, this isn't some back-alley peasant trick. This is accepted science, medieval science, but still, the court apothecary defends it passionately. According to him, urine from a healthy noblewoman, especially first thing in the morning, is practically alchemical. Never mind that the smell alone is strong enough to kill your appetite for 3 days. Apparently that's the smell of purification. Your chambermaids collect it diligently. There are rows of ceramic pots tucked beneath the stairs, each one labelled by source and day of collection. It's organised like a terrifying wine cellar. Yesterday's Queen's First Stream sits beside Tuesday Blend, which smells a bit like hot cabbage. You wish you were making that up. You're not. Once you even caught the apothecary swishing a little in a jar and sniffing it like a sommelier. You left the room immediately and seriously considered exile. What's fascinating and disgusting is how multi-purpose the stuff is. Beyond its role in laundry and dental care, urine is used in treating wounds, softening leather, removing stains, and even setting dyes in fabric. You begin to suspect there's nothing in this castle that hasn't been peed on at some point in its life. That beautiful crimson velvet gown, probably soaked in lye before being dyed. The dazzling blue sash gifted by a foreign diplomat, most likely fixed with stale urine from 3 different people, and then spritzed with rose oil to hide the crime. One day your maid applies a facial mask made of milk, powdered eggshell, and yes, just a touch of chamber lye. She assures you it will give you the smooth, pale complexion favoured by the court. You sit there for 20 minutes with a warm, sticky, faintly acidic paste hardening on your cheeks, trying not to breathe through your nose. When she wipes it off, your skin does look tighter, but also slightly red and burning. You spend the rest of the day smelling faintly of an abandoned latrine and trying to pretend it's just your new perfume. And yet, for all its horrors, the use of urine isn't limited to your rank. From laundresses to noblewomen, it's common across social classes. Even the king, although he'd never admit it, has his doublets occasionally cleaned with it, through several layers of servants, of course, so he doesn't have to smell his own contribution. But you know, everyone knows. There's a specific sharpness to that scent that no amount of lavender can truly mask. Some scholars today debate how frequently urine was really used in royal routines. Some say it was more common in lower households, a practical solution when soap was expensive or hard to make. Others believe queens, ever the trendsetters of their time, did indeed subject themselves to the same concoctions, especially if it came recommended by a trusted physician or nun with a reputation for miracle cures. After all, if the saints never bathed and still glowed in the paintings, who's to say a little urine can't be holy? There are even stranger variations. Some formulas call for mixing urine with ashes or crushed snails. Others recommend boiling it down and concentrating it into a paste. One terrifying preparation involved combining it with goat bile and wine to remove freckles. It worked, probably because it burned off the top 3 layers of skin. You begin to suspect that half of medieval skincare was just very aggressive exfoliation and a wildly high tolerance for shame. You also learn quickly to be diplomatic about the whole thing, pretending not to notice when someone's breath carries a faint vinegar and ammonia bouquet, accepting gifts of purifying lotions with thanks, even as your nose wrinkles. You attend feast after feast beside duchesses whose gowns smell like they have been soaked in sun-baked chamber pots, and you smile through it all because it's normal. Just like masking lice, just like perfuming sweat, just like pretending your bed isn't alive. And somehow, despite all this, there's a weird sense of pride around it. The Queen's urine, after all, is considered pure, special, fit for sacred uses. A royal chamber pot isn't just a toilet, it's a resource. Your bodily waste is one of the few things truly yours, and it gets passed down the chain of service like an alchemical elixir or... No one talks about it directly, of course. That would be vulgar. But you catch the occasional reverent glance at your chambermaids as they carry the porcelain pots down the corridor, as if they're transporting liquid gold instead of whatever that smell is. So you carry on, you rinse, you scrub, you allow your maids to dab questionable tinctures along your neck while muttering reassurances. You try not to think too hard about where that gown has been or what's been used to freshen it. Because in this palace, tradition rules. And if centuries of queens have endured being marinated in their own bodily byproducts, then by God so will you. Still, late at night, when the torches burn low and the bedbugs are having their nightly feast, you can't help but dream of water. Real water. Hot, soapy, fragrant water that cleans and doesn't smell like old asparagus. But dreams are for peasants with rivers. You're a queen. And apparently this is how royalty smells. You wake up one morning, if you can call it that, more like regaining consciousness after hours of flea-bitten semi-paralysis, and your scalp feels off. Not itchy, necessarily, just alive. The kind of alive that makes you question everything. And sure enough, when your maid removes your sleeping cap and runs her fingers along your hairline, she pauses, then says nothing, then says everything by dropping the comb into a basin with a faint wet plop and backing slowly out of the room. Wigs. The crown jewel of medieval pageantry. You've worn them, you've smiled through them, but until now you hadn't really understood them. Now you do. Now you live them. Your natural hair has declared mutiny, and the only solution is to hide the crime under someone else's scalp. The wig you're offered isn't delicate. It's not even remotely comfortable. It's a heavy sun-baked powder-dusted nest of woven human and animal hair that smells faintly of smoke and lavender, and more strongly of something that once had a pulse. You hold it in your hands and feel a faint crunch. That crunch, you're told, is just the powder. You're not reassured. Still, you let your maid wrestle your hair into tight braids and pin the mass to your skull so the wig can rest flat. Because yes, your own head is too unruly for even this monstrous coiffure. Once the wig is on, you're transformed. From irritated human to sculpted goddess, your hairline is suddenly perfect. The curls frame your face like they were painted by a Renaissance angel having a good day. You look in the mirror and almost forget that you're now wearing a scalp cage. Almost. And then it starts to itch. Because no matter how beautiful it looks, the truth is simple. It's hot, it's sweaty, and it's home. Not to you, but to any number of microscopic roommates. Fleas, mites, lice, they love wigs. Wigs are their castles. lush, warm, and conveniently unwashed. Your attendants powder them between uses with crushed herbs, chalk, or even flour to keep them fresh, which is a hilarious phrase when applied to something that's only slightly less unsanitary than a barn floor. But those measures just cover the problem, literally. Sometimes you can feel the movement, sometimes the wig smells a little sour. You do your best to ignore it. It's what queens do. You nod through court meetings, smile during mass, and tilt your head gracefully at suitors, all while your scalp is having a panic attack under 4 pounds of sweaty louse-adjacent fashion. And when the wig is removed at night, because even royal heads need a break, you see what's left behind. The hair underneath is flat, greasy, and often full of angry red bumps that ooze slightly when touched. Your physician calls them scalp roses, which sounds poetic until you realise he means follicular cysts. One even burst during a banquet once. You kept smiling. And it's not just you. Everyone's wearing wigs. The Queen's Court is a parade of sculpted, powdered heads perched like trophies on stiff necks. There's Lady Alazan, whose towering red curls are so wide she can't fit through narrow doorways. Or Countess Brune, whose hair is so elaborately braided and looped that you're fairly certain it could be used to trap birds. No one talks about the weight, or the heat, or the time that a rat tried to build a nest inside a count's hairpiece during Lent. These are not things that polite society mentions. These are the secrets hidden behind the curls. You once asked your maid why no one just cut their hair short and went without. She looked at you like you'd suggested worshipping the devil. Hair, after all, is a symbol of nobility, of femininity, of control. To show your real hair, unpowdered, uncovered, unpolished, is to show vulnerability. Wildness, humanity, and queens, as we've established, are not supposed to be human. They are concepts in gowns. The irony, of course, is that wigs were originally meant to solve hygiene problems. Back in the earlier centuries, people figured it was easier to shave your head and wear a fake one. You can remove it, powder it, store it away from bugs and sweat. Smart in theory, but in practice the wigs quickly became more high maintenance than the heads they replaced. They weren't cleaned so much as refreshed. A spritz of rosewater here, a dusting of chalk there. There's an entire chamber devoted to wig storage, and the smell inside is indescribable. Imagine a bakery that also houses taxidermy. That's close. Some queens reportedly owned dozens of wigs, different styles for different occasions. There was the hunting wig, more practical and tightly coiled, and the banquet wig, a shimmering mass of imported hair curled into oblivion. One French queen supposedly had a wig so large and stiff that it had to be supported by wires hidden beneath her gown. She wore it once, then never again, after it caused her to faint mid-toast. There's even a strange belief that a well-powdered wig could ward off illness. The herbs used in the powder, lavender, sage, rue, were thought to purify the air around your head. Never mind that they also choked your lungs and clogged your pores. That's what glamour is, suffering with a scent of lilac, and yet, for all its horrors, the wig becomes part of you. Not because you like it, not because it's comfortable, but because it's expected. You wear it like a crown, or, let's be honest, instead of a crown half the time. You see yourself in it and recognise the queen the world wants you to be. Composed, elegant, unnatural. The real you. That poor woman scratching at her temple under a candlelit fresco while praying no one sees the rash spreading down her hairline. She doesn't get a portrait. Modern historians debate how often wigs were truly worn in medieval courts. Some argue that full wigs weren't widespread until later centuries, while others point to records of elaborate false hairpieces and hair extensions used even in early royal households. But whether you're wearing a full hair helmet or just weaving in extensions laced with perfume, the result is the same: beauty over comfort and appearance over air circulation. By the end of the day, your head is sore, your scalp is raw, and you've developed an almost spiritual connection with your wig stand. And when you finally remove the thing, it makes a soft squelching sound against your skin that sends a shiver down your spine. You resist the urge to scream. Instead, you smile at your maid, accept your evening herbal compress with grace, and hope that tonight, when you close your eyes, your dreams won't include a close-up of something crawling out of your hairline. Spoiler, it will. You think you're prepared when the time finally comes to visit the royal privy. You've heard stories, caught whispers in the halls, and even smelled it from a distance on warmer days. Still, some foolish part of your brain clings to hope. Surely a queen with her rubies, her servants, her heavy gold rings, has access to something a notch above horror. But the moment the maid swings open that thick wooden door and gestures politely, all that hope dies, swiftly, violently, and without dignity. There it is, the latrine. A seat, if you can call it that, carved into a large slab of stone, worn smooth by generations of royal posteriors and probably cursed by at least a few. The hole gapes at you like a mouth, a damp, musty, soul-sucking mouth that leads straight into a vertical shaft, and then to nowhere good. You lean over it slightly, curious and horrified, and instantly regret everything. The stench that rises is not merely offensive, it's an entity. It has layers, notes, nuances. The upper tones suggest rot and ammonia. The mid-range carries hints of mildew, human panic, and very old stew. The base, despair. You step back, eyes watering. The maid smiles sympathetically and hands you a small bundle of herbs. You stare. "To hold under your nose, my lady," she explains. "It helps." It doesn't. You try. You jam the herbs under your nose so hard you sneeze and nearly drop them into the abyss. And then, of course, there's the moment you have to actually use it. There's no seat, no comfort, just cold stone and the constant risk of slipping. You lift your skirts with practiced fingers and position yourself trying to hover without touching the surface because, let's be honest, no amount of perfume in the world can make peace with what's likely been on that slab. You grip the wall for balance, breathing through your mouth and praying that no one walks in, despite the thick wooden door that only sort of latches, because privacy, that's not really a thing. If someone really needs the privy, they'll knock and barge in anyway. You're not sacred here, not even slightly. The worst part is what comes next. Clean up. There's no toilet paper, no soft cloth. You're offered rags, reusable rags, raggedy, rough, and vaguely damp from prior use. You stare at them in horror as the maid holds them out like she's offering you a plate of pastries. You have to ask, what happens to them afterward? She shrugs. "We rinse them in the stream and boil them on Sundays." On Sundays, so 6 days a week they just hang around. Some queens are lucky enough to have sponges, on sticks, dipped in vinegar between uses, if you're in an especially hygienic household. If not, it's just sponging and wishing. And let's not even talk about what happens when there's a wardrobe malfunction. Imagine trying to wipe with a yard of velvet trailing behind you like a flag of poor decisions. More than one noblewoman has tripped on her own train and had to be yanked out of the hole. There are stories. One ends with the phrase, "and she never walked quite right again." But back to the hole. The shaft beneath your stone throne doesn't go anywhere fast. It's called a guardrobe, and it's just a vertical tunnel that empties into a pit, a moat, or sometimes straight down a castle wall. You think castle walls are majestic? That mossy streak you admired earlier was not moss. Let that image nestle deep in your dreams. And those pits, they fill. Slowly, grotesquely, and often with consequences. You've heard tales of them backing up during rainy seasons, flooding the privy with a rising tide of medieval vengeance. One winter, a lower hall had to be evacuated after the guardrobe overflowed and sent steaming runoff across the stone floors. They called it the Great Unpleasantness. No one talks about it now. They just mutter and move their chairs away from that side of the hall, cleaning the privy as a punishment. A task for servants who've displeased someone powerful, or just drawn the short straw in life. Once a month, a crew of unfortunate souls is sent in with shovels, cloths tied around their faces, and strong liquor to dull the horror. They emerge pale, trembling, and blessed with stories they'll never share. You nod politely when they pass. You'd knight them all if you could. Of course, some queens manage to avoid the worst of it. There are portable chamber pots, small enough to be discreet and often used in your private chambers. But even these are no luxury. They're porcelain bowls with minimal capacity and zero odour control. You use one once during a storm when going to the guardrobe feels like suicide and the smell lingers in your room for days. You consider setting the chamber pot on fire. Your maid gently suggests incense, and because everything in your life is monitored and interpreted, even your trips to the latrine are subject to gossip. If you visit too often, people suspect illness. If not enough, they suspect pregnancy. Your physicians insist on inspecting the contents from time to time, because yes, even your waste is subject to scrutiny. They look for signs of imbalance in your humours, any hint of melancholy or choler. The colour, the smell, the frequency, it's all data in the great medieval guessing game that is medicine. There's a persistent belief that the queen's excrement smells sweeter than anyone else's, a myth spread by flattery and desperately maintained by maids armed with herbs. You know better. You've stood over the hole, you've dropped the herbs in, there's nothing sweet about it. Some scholars today argue that medieval latrines were ahead of their time, early examples of waste separation, even rudimentary plumbing. But those same scholars have never knelt on a cold stone slab with no support while trying not to faint from the smell of centuries. It's easy to praise early sanitation systems from the safe, sterile distance of a modern bathroom. You're here now, you're living it, and it is not revolutionary. So you rise, sore-kneed and humbled, you press a scented cloth to your face, exit with your dignity only partially intact, and say, nothing. Because that's how it works. You endure. You nod when people call you radiant. You smile when they say you have the grace of the saints. And you never, never speak of what just happened behind that door. You've been at court long enough now to understand one of its unspoken rules. No one ever talks about the smell. Not really. Oh, there are gestures. Delicate handkerchiefs raised to noses, fans fluttering a bit too fast, pointed glances toward an open window. But direct acknowledgement, verboten. You could be sitting next to a nobleman who smells like he just rolled in a cheese cellar during a thunderstorm. And still, etiquette dictates you smile, offer a compliment about his hat, and pretend your eyes aren't watering. The hypocrisy is almost artful. People here spend hours on appearances, powdered wigs, embroidered cuffs, even gilded fingernails. But they will parade through the banquet hall in layers of unwashed velvet, like it's the height of sophistication. The collective strategy seems to be, look divine, smell like a goat and pretend it's all someone else's fault. Of course, everyone knows. The Queen's nose doesn't lie. You walk past a group of courtiers and catch whiffs of old sweat, mildewed fabric, and the faint, acrid tang of something you hope is spoiled milk, but fear is worse. And yet these same people will bow, kiss your hand, and expect you to remain composed while their scent assaults your senses like a chemical weapon wrapped in brocade. There's a social hierarchy to it too. You're allowed to smell bad, but only if you're important enough. If a servant reeks, they're reprimanded, scolded, or quietly dismissed. But if a visiting duchess stinks so violently that her lapdog refuses to sit on her lap, well then clearly it's the damp weather, or perhaps she's very pious, and fasting makes the body purge impurities. Nothing is ever what it obviously is. You'll hear things like, Lady Matilda is sensitive to water, or the Countess has a strong constitution. Translated, they are fermenting. One of your chambermaids once confided that nobles have developed a kind of odour-based code. She called it scent diplomacy. A duchess who bathes too often might be seen as frivolous or even suspect, possibly trying to mask some secret vice. Meanwhile, someone who smells aggressively natural might be seen as authentic, or worse, holy. There's even a rumour that a particularly rancid archbishop was once declared saintly simply because his reek lingered in a chapel for days after he left. People claimed it was a sign. You suspect it was just old socks and mould, and yet no one admits it, not even among friends. Once, during a private dinner, your gown brushed against the sleeve of a baron whose odour was so profound it left a ghost of itself on your fabric. You could smell it for hours. Did anyone mention it? Of course not. You all sat there sipping wine and nibbling on dry pheasant, pretending the air wasn't actively trying to choke you. The passive-aggressive tactics are endless. Someone might casually suggest a bathhouse visit, knowing full well that's a coded insult. Another favourite move is the spontaneous gift of scented gloves, a little pouch of crushed herbs slipped into someone's hands with a too-sweet smile. Classic. You once received an entire bouquet of lavender from a visiting princess who hugged you a little too tightly. The message was clear. You had just come back from travel. You'd been on the road for 3 days, you knew what you smelled like, and still you smiled, thanked her, and mentally added her name to your list. The problem, of course, is that you're just as guilty. You've gone entire weeks with the same gown, the same underlayer, the same sour ribbon tying your hair back. You've masked it with perfume, powders, and that weird mint walnut tincture your apothecary insists is cleansing to the aura. But at some point you can't fool yourself. When your own stench starts to cling to your throne cushion, you know it's time to act, and yet still you don't speak of it. You simply summon your maid, murmur something about feeling the humours unbalanced, and wait for her to begin preparing the full deodorizing ritual. It involves vinegar, rosewater, crushed lemon balm, and a body cloth that feels like it's made from loofah and bad decisions. You scrub until your skin protests, then slip back into your old gown and pray the powders hold. Spoiler, they don't. This whole charade gets even more surreal during feast days. when the palace is packed with viziers. The air becomes a heady soup of human musk, roasted meat, tallow candles and perfumes ranging from floral to full necromancer. Everyone is pretending they don't notice. You watch noble women pretending not to gag when passing the bishop, while knights offer wide, exaggerated bows to avoid getting too close to one another. It's not so much choreography as it is collective denial. It's like watching a ballroom of people dancing around a corpse no one's allowed to admit is there. Even love is not spared. Courtly romance, that poetic tangle of longing glances and handwritten sonnets, is constantly at war with the reality of smell. You once received a love letter that reeked of musk, so aggressively it nearly made your nose bleed. The man who sent it showed up later with breath like rancid onions, and a collar so soaked with sweat it left marks on the chair. And still you blushed, curtsied, and allowed him to recite another stanza about your violet-scented soul. A soul that at that moment smelled distinctly of wool, stale bread, and goat butter. Scholars argue over whether medieval people really noticed their own odour. Some claim they were so accustomed to it they barely registered it. Others suggest they did notice, but associated smell with morality or class rather than hygiene. Cleanliness was, after all, more about spiritual purity than body odour. A saint who stank was still a saint. A noble woman with breath like garlic stuffed eel was still a lady, just perhaps one with a stronger aura. You've started playing the game too, carrying your scented handkerchief, tucking lavender sachets into your bodice, speaking a little faster when the smell in a room reaches critical mass. Just to speed things along, you've even learned to cough politely when someone crosses the line. It's a subtle art. Too strong and it's rude, too weak and it's ignored. Just enough to say, I notice, but I'm a lady. By now you've accepted that this is just how it is. The court will always look better than it smells. The queen will always glide past whispers, powdered and painted, her scent trailing just seconds behind her like a well-trained servant. And everyone will keep pretending. Because in the royal court poises power, and no one ever admits that the palace smells like a glorified barn. You're sitting in front of a polished brass mirror, which distorts your reflection just enough to make everything feel dreamlike, or maybe nightmarish. Your maid is hovering nearby with a tray of cosmetics, each more questionable than the last. The first time you underwent this ritual, you assumed it would be simple. A dab of rouge, a touch of powder, and voila, queenly radiance. What you got instead was a lesson in chemical warfare disguised as beauty. The base layer is white lead paste. Yes, lead, you know it's poison. Everyone does, but no one seems particularly bothered. Pale skin is the ultimate status symbol, the kind that says, I've never worked in a field, touched sunlight, or broken a sweat that wasn't holy. So you sit still while the maid smears it across your face like she's frosting a cake that fears God. The paste is thick and heavy, and as it dries, it cracks slightly at the corners of your mouth and eyes, giving you the delightful appearance of a haunted porcelain doll. It stings. Of course it does. That's how you know it's working. At least that's what the apothecary says. You once asked if there was a less painful alternative. He raised a brow and offered something made from vinegar and crushed snail shells. It worked about as well as you'd expect. Less beauty, more exfoliation by sandpaper. Next comes the rouge, made from either cochineal, beetles or red ochre. You try not to think too hard about it. The maid dabs it on your cheeks and lips, aiming for that just blushed look, though what you actually get is somewhere between a live and startled tomato. Still, it's better than the alternative, looking healthy. Nothing's more peasant-coded than colour in your cheeks that wasn't manually applied. For your eyebrows, a small brush dipped in soot and hog fat does the job. Yes, fat, straight from a pig. You can smell it faintly when the maid leans in. It's like she's painting your face with a soaky pork chop. And the soot? It gets everywhere. One bad sneeze and you're sporting smudges like a disgraced jester. Once, your eyebrows melted slightly by the fire, and no one told you. You smiled through an entire feast looking like someone had tried to draw moustaches on your forehead mid-nap. You'd think the eyes would get a break. They do not. Belladonna drops are applied to make your pupils dilate, to make you look more romantic, someone once said. You blink, your vision goes blurry, and you spend the next hour trying not to trip over the edge of your gown. But you look mysterious, and that's the point. A queen must never appear fully present. Your beauty, your elegance. You're also possibly blind. And let's not forget the finishing touch. A dusting of scented powder all over the face and neck, Usually made of starch mixed with crushed flower petals. It smells lovely for about 5 minutes, then mingles with your natural oils, sweat, and whatever's wafting in from the garderobe down the hall. By midday, your face feels like it's encased in a soggy pastry crust. You avoid smiling too wide lest your cheeks flake off like old parchment. Despite all this, people praise your beauty constantly. The Queen glows, they say. Oh, she has the skin of a saint. You resist the urge to say saints were often dead and your face feels like it's halfway there. But instead you smile, carefully, always carefully, and offer a coy thank you. Because that's your role, not to be beautiful, but to appear beautiful, even if it costs you the top layer of your skin. And oh, it does. The lead paste seeps into your pores, giving you that sickly luminous look everyone admires. It also slowly poisons you. Some days your gums bleed. You get dizzy when you stand too fast. Your hair thins around the temples. Just age, the physician says, despite you being 23. You've started developing little sores along your jawline, which your maid now dutifully powders over each morning like she's bearing evidence. It's not just you. Nearly every woman at court is fighting the same war. Lady Isabel has developed a persistent tremor in her left hand. Lady Odette wears gloves constantly, even at dinner, to hide the rash spreading up her fingers from her favourite cream. Some combination of mercury, honey, and crushed pearls. Even your mother-in-law, the Dowager Queen, has patches on her face where the some skin looks melted, like wax left too close to a candle. She wears a veil now and speaks only from shadows, yet no one dares stop. Going barefaced is scandalous. It implies laziness or worse, honesty. A naked face is a working woman's face, a real woman's face, and that has no place in the palace, where reality is something to be powdered, painted and perfumed into oblivion. If you ever showed up to court without makeup, people wouldn't assume you were tired. They'd assume you were cursed. There's one old tale of a queen who refused cosmetics. Said her soul would speak through her natural face. She lasted 3 weeks before a courtier casually referred to her as that haggish little soul speaker. By the next month, she was back to smearing goat fat and powdered coral across her cheeks with the best of them. Modern scholars sometimes argue about how widespread these toxic beautification habits really were. Some believe only the most fashion-forward courts indulged in full lead-face cosplay, while others suggest that even minor nobles mimicked these routines, desperate to emulate royal elegance. There's even a fringe theory that some of these cosmetics were invented specifically to weaken women over time, less beauty, more quiet compliance. You'd roll your eyes, but the lead makes that risky, yes? And so, every morning you sit for the ritual. You let yourself be brushed, smeared, painted, and powdered into a version of yourself that no longer resembles anyone you recognise. You look regal, you look timeless, you look like the sort of woman who could give birth to kings and never sweat. But underneath it all, your skin itches, your eyes water, and your lips crack behind their carmine sheen. You're a portrait, a sculpture, a mask carved out of poison and pork fat, and you're expected to wear it with pride. Today you're getting a facial made of ground pearls, deer marrow, and egg whites. Yes, actual pearls, and actual marrow. It's been mixed into a frothy, pale goop that your maid assures you will bring back the glow of youth. You try not to gag as she begins applying it to your face with a wooden spatula that still smells faintly of last week's snail cream. The mixture is cold and clumpy. Bits of grit cling to your cheeks as if the pearls are actively judging you. But this is the life of a queen. You don't complain. You simply sit in your high-back chair and pretend the deer marrow isn't slowly sliding down your neck. Animal parts are all the rage. There's practically no creature on earth that hasn't been repurposed into royal beauty. Swine, goats, oxen. If it has skin or glands, someone has figured out a way to smear it on your face. Deer, though, are special. Nobility sees them as graceful, pure and noble, which apparently makes their bodily fluids excellent for firming skin and removing blemishes. The marrow is boiled and strained, then mixed with rose water and ground amber to create something that smells like expired stew and regret. According to your apothecary, it also nourishes the flesh. You're not convinced, but you are sticky. Later, after the mixture has hardened into something resembling dried paste, it's peeled off in strips. Your maid mutters a prayer under her breath as she tugs. Apparently peeling too fast can upset your humours. Meanwhile, you grit your teeth and feel your face pull upward like a medieval puppet. It's not pleasant, but your skin does feel tighter afterward, in the same way your legs feel tight after falling down a flight of stairs. And this is only step one. After the mask comes the rubbing. Oils made from goose grease and beaver tail are massaged into your skin to seal in the glow. It's greasy. It smells like a hunting lodge, but this too is considered desirable. The glow of royalty isn't natural, it's basted. You learn quickly that the medieval beauty standard isn't about health. It's about effort, pain, sacrifice. A queen's radiance is proof of her status, not because she looks beautiful, but because she can afford to suffer for it. The more outrageous the ritual, the more noble the woman. One noble woman allegedly bathed in milk daily, sourced from 50 goats hand-fed herbs to ensure the milk smelled like spring meadows. Another swore by a paste made of crushed nightingale droppings. You once overheard a courtier whisper that Queen Marguerite used frog liver poultices under her eyes to reduce puffiness. Whether or not that's true is irrelevant. What matters is that no one's surprised. And it doesn't stop at the face. You're told to rub ground coral mixed with ox blood into your palms to make them pink and youthful. You soak your feet in a broth made from rabbit organs and rosemary, meant to soften the skin and prevent cracks. Your nails are tinted using a paste of saffron and crushed beetles. That's right, beetles. Tiny crimson insects dried and pulverized into a dust that stains your fingers the same red as your lips. It takes hours to apply and days to fade. You feel like a murderess with a manicure. The worst part? Most of it doesn't even work. Or if it does, it works for 5 minutes before your skin revolts. You've had breakouts that looked like plagues. One time, a new cream made from fermented eel oil gave you a rash so red and inflamed it had its own borders. Your physician was delighted. A strong reaction, Tuckery said, shows it's effective. He then offered to lance the boils and balance your humours with a leech or two. You politely declined and locked your doors for 3 days. Still, there's no escaping it. The court is obsessed with appearances, and animal-based beauty is a performance as much as a practice. People trade recipes like they're state secrets. Your ladies-in-waiting hold informal contests over whose cream smells the least like death. And if someone walks into a room glowing suspiciously, there's always a whisper. What is she using? As if youth can be stolen through rumour and goose fat. There's even an underground market for exotic animal products. One merchant recently brought in jars of crushed civet glands, harvested from wildcats and said to cure wrinkles. You paid a small fortune for a single jar, only to learn that the smell was so overpowering it had to be buried under a layer of camphor just to be tolerable. You used it once for... The king complimented your wilderness aroma. You buried the rest behind a tapestry and prayed the cat gods didn't curse you. Of course, not everyone buys into the trend. There are rumours of queens who preferred simplicity. Natural oils, herbs from the garden, a quick rinse in rainwater. They are rare, and often remembered more for their eccentricity than their beauty. The Earth Queen, they call one. You suspect that's court-coded for she smelled like a compost bin. You admire the bravery, though. You sometimes fantasize about washing your face with just water. No marrow, no mollusks, just cool, clean water. But that's the kind of madness that gets you exiled to a convent. Historians argue about how widespread these beauty rituals were. Some believe most of it was limited to royal courts with money to burn and time to waste. Others claim even minor nobles copied what they could, using chicken fat instead of swan or ditch water instead of goat milk. The ambition to glow was universal. The budget? Not so much. But you're not just any noble, you're the queen, and your face powdered and painted and basted like a festival goose is a political statement. People bow to it. People lie to it. People trust it more than your words. You've learned to wield it like a weapon, even if it's quietly killing you. At the end of the day, when the mask is finally peeled off, the powder's rubbed away and the pig fat cleansed, sort of, you look at your real face in the mirror. Raw, red, a little swollen, a few spots that feel tender to the touch. You look older, but you've earned it. Tomorrow you'll do it all again, because beauty may fade, but deer marrow is forever. There are certain things no one at court will talk about directly, and high on that list is menstruation. Not because it's shameful, at least not entirely, but because it's inconvenient. The queen, after all, is supposed to exist in a state of near-divine composure at all times. Bleeding monthly like any other mortal woman? That doesn't fit the image. And yet here you are, curled slightly to one side in your high-backed throne, suppressing a cramp that feels like it's trying to kill you from the inside out, while a bishop drones on about grain taxes. The moment your courses begin, everything shifts behind the scenes. There's a subtle tension in the air. a kind of hush among your attendants. Your chief maid recognises the signs immediately. Your pale face, your slightly stiffer walk, the way you wince just before a sneeze. She offers you the usual, a tightly folded bundle of linen rags, a strip of soft wool, and a handful of herbs that smell like disappointment and burnt toast. These are your monthly companions. You do not ask for better, because better does not exist. You retreat briefly to your chambers where the ritual begins. There's no medieval equivalent of a tampon. Instead, you're provided with long, narrow cloths called clouts that you carefully fold and place inside a linen girdle that ties around your waist and between your legs. There is no elastic, no adhesive, just a complicated knot system and a prayer to St. Bridget. The result is functional, if barely. It shifts when you walk, it leaks if you sit for too long, and it must be changed several times a day, which means a whole team of maids are now on discreet standby, ready to pretend this bodily function is both sacred and invisible. The used rags are collected in a discreet lidded basket and set aside to be boiled later, usually in water mixed with lye, vinegar, or if you're unlucky, urine. They tell you the smell is earthy. They lie. If the weather is warm, the basket is removed more quickly. But if it's cold or if the laundresses are busy, it might sit in the corner of your chamber for hours, quietly emanating its royal perfume into the air like a forgotten cheese. You're expected to maintain appearances throughout. Your walk must be as graceful as ever. Your posture, impeccable. You can't wince, groan, or even make that subtle face you've developed when a cramp hits like a battering ram. If you do, someone will assume you're sick, or worse, pregnant. Every twitch of your brow becomes a topic of gossip. A misplaced hand over your belly, a scandal waiting to happen. You once coughed while clutching a hot brick to your abdomen, and 3 different nobles sent word to Rome to start drafting papal congratulations. Your remedies are limited. You're allowed certain teas, mugwort, pennyroyal, chamomile, but most of them taste like hay and regret. You've tried soaking cloths in hot wine and pressing them to your belly. That worked exactly once and then gave you a rash. The physician suggests leeches naturally. One even proposed bleeding from the ankle to balance the humours. You stared at him in silence until he quietly left your chambers and was never invited back. There's also the issue of your scent. During your courses, you're told your body exudes a stronger odour, which is believed by some to upset the male humours and possibly wilt flowers. You're advised to carry extra sachets, strong ones, and to avoid embracing anyone closely. Once you were told not to walk through the garden while menstruating lest the roses curl up in shame. You did it anyway. The roses survived. The gardener didn't speak to you for a week. Of course, there are the moral implications. Religious advisors, when they dare broach the topic, hint that your blood is unclean, that your touch can spoil holy objects. You're discreetly excused from Mass during your heaviest days, although the official reason is always headache or contemplative rest. One overly zealous monk once warned you not to sit on the same wooden bench as the relics, lest you taint their purity. You sat on them anyway. Nothing happened, except he fainted. One of the stranger rituals you endure involves wearing a small pouch of dried toad flesh tied around your ankle, said to reduce bleeding. Another time, a midwife suggested that sniffing dried fish heads would stop your cramps. It did not. It merely gave you cramps and a stomachache. But these remedies are part of the performance. You're not just bleeding, you're suffering frank nobly, quietly, elegantly, like a woman of station. There's a fringe belief that menstruation grants you a kind of mystical power. Some even say it enhances prophecy or connects you more directly to the divine. A few of your more eccentric ladies-in-waiting speak in whispers about moon magic and the potency of blooded linen. One swears she had a vision during her last cycle after falling asleep with a clove of garlic tied to her wrist. You want to laugh, but after the month you bled for 9 days straight and dreamed about a field of weeping cows, you're not so sure. Historians today argue whether queens truly suffered more than common women when it came to menstrual management. Some point out that noble women had access to finer linen, better herbs, more privacy. Others argue that royal expectations, the need to appear eternally pristine, made everything worse. You'd argue it's both. Yes, your clouts are made of finely woven cloth, but they still chafe. And yes, you have an army of women to help you through the worst days, but you also have the court's eyes on you at all times. And when your cycle arrives at an inconvenient moment, like during a feast, or in the middle of a diplomatic negotiation, you learn to carry on. Smiling, nodding, a occasionally excusing yourself with vague references to tiredness. Meanwhile, you're praying to every saint you know that your linen girdle holds, that the cramps don't double you over, and that your gown doesn't begin to betray you in front of a crowd. At night, you sleep uneasily, the damp clouts bunched uncomfortably, the knowledge of your body's betrayal hanging heavy in the air. You sometimes wonder what it would be like to simply rest, to lie in bed with a hot brick, a clean sheet, and no one watching. But queens don't rest. Queens bleed in silence under velvet sheets and embroidered ceilings, because in a world where your blood is sacred, shameful, and political all at once, there is no such thing as relief, only routine. You've always known that travel as a queen wouldn't be glamorous, but nothing prepares you for the full sensory experience of hitting the medieval road. The morning begins with a flurry of squawking geese, shouting servants, and the unholy aroma of boiled meat and wet leather. You're barely awake when your maid informs you that your royal procession is set to depart within the hour. She's already stuffed you into what is basically a moving tent made of velvet, multiple layers cinched tightly, topped with a headdress heavy enough to alter your centre of gravity. Your gown drags behind you, soaking up the early morning dew, and judging by the smell, at least one horse's contribution to the road. You ride in a covered litter, which sounds nice, like a medieval limousine carried by burly men in matching hose, but in practice, it's a narrow wooden box suspended between two poles, with wool cushions that haven't been cleaned since the last coronation, and windows that trap more dust than they block. The inside gets hot fast, especially when you're stuffed in there like a decorative sausage, clutching a sprig of mint under your nose while pretending not to sweat through 3 layers of brocade. The air grows thick with body heat, perfume, and that special kind of damp that only exists inside enclosed spaces shared with other humans and their travel-sized anxiety. Then there are the roads. Calling them roads is generous. What you get are deep rutted mud trails riddled with holes, strewn with animal droppings, and occasionally bisected by what could generously be described as a bridge, or less generously a few logs someone dumped over a ditch. Every bump sends your teeth clacking together, your headdress listing dramatically to one side, and your knees knocking into the wooden panels of your travelling box. You consider praying to St. Christopher, the patron saint of travellers, but you suspect he's laughing. You stop frequently, partly because the road is awful, and partly is because someone always has to relieve themselves. And let's be clear, relieving yourself on the road as a queen is a horror show. You're led behind a cart or down a ditch, flanked by anxious maids holding up your skirts like you're about to be launched into orbit. The privacy cloth they hang is little more than a gesture, and the ground is either too rocky to crouch or too wet to survive. There are no toilets. There are no clean cloths. Just you, the wind, and a growing list of regrets. Meals are worse. There's no real table when you're travelling, just whatever plank of wood or overturned crate the servants can find. You're handed bread that crumbles like plaster, cheese that sweats more than you do, and dried meat tough enough to use as armour. Everything tastes faintly of leather, and every goblet of wine is warm and lightly seasoned with dust. If you're lucky, someone remembered the salt. If not, your meal is as bland as it is chewy. And that's saying something when the main course may or may not have eyes. Sleeping arrangements? Prepare to be amazed. Sometimes you get a manor house or an abbey to rest in, cold stone, draughty halls, a mattress stuffed with straw and the broken dreams of previous monarchs. Other times it's a tent. A royal tent, yes. Lined with silk banners and embroidered hangings, but at the end of the day, still a tent. Still canvas flapping in the wind, still mice in the bedding, still damp earth beneath your slippers. You once found a slug in your pillow. You named it after your cousin and carried on. Bathing on the road is a laughable concept. If you're lucky, a wooden tub is hauled into your tent, filled with water from a nearby stream and heated with a few kettles over a smoky fire. The water is shallow and your maids grumble, and halfway through the bath someone inevitably trips over a tent rope and bursts in on you mid-scrub. Modesty is impossible. Cleanliness, a myth. You emerge slightly damp, slightly steamed, and entirely unconvinced you're any less dirty than before. You have to admire the horses, though. They are somehow cleaner than most people. Brushed, fed, respected. Meanwhile, you're clinging to the inside of a litter, chewing stale figs and silently praying your bladder holds for another mile. You start to resent the horses. They get to stretch their legs. They get to pee without assistance. They don't have to wear velvet. Of course, none of this is visible in the records. When you arrive at your destination, a distant castle, a regional court, a cathedral awaiting your pious presence. You step out of your litter with a forced smile. Your face is powdered, your dress is adjusted, your smile is glued into place. You greet the lords and ladies as if you hadn't just spent 6 hours bouncing like a coin in a cup. They call you radiant. You think you smell like boiled wool and horse sweat, but you curtsy, thank them, and step into the next round of performances. Travel for a queen is not about the journey, it's about being seen. You arrive, you dazzle, you pretend the trip didn't happen, because if you let the mask slip, if you admit your feet are blistered, your thighs are chafed, and your scalp is crusted in dust, then you've shattered the illusion. And in this world, the illusion is everything. Scholars today sometimes romanticize royal travel. They speak of grand processions, banners flying, trumpets blaring. And sure, those things happen, but between the moments of glory are the bumps, the bugs, the smells. There's a big difference between being a queen on horseback and being a queen with a full bladder and no suitable bush in sight. You learn to find small comforts. A pouch of dried lavender under your pillow, a well-trained horse that doesn't try to bite you, a meal where the meat is definitely absolutely not mystery game. And sometimes, just sometimes, a stream clean enough to rinse your face without immediately regretting it. You return from your travels exhausted, filthy, and greeted with applause. They say you were graceful, they say you were inspiring, they say the people love you. They say nothing about the fact that you've gone 3 days without a proper wipe and haven't felt your toes since morning. You've come to understand that filth, like power, flows downward, and in this court, the bottom of that flow stops somewhere between your chamber pot and the laundry hearth. The servants bear the worst of it. They scrub, sweep, carry, and haul in silence, or at least with the kind of quiet grumbling that never reaches a noble ear. But what they deal with, you wouldn't survive a week. And the strange twisted part of it all? Neither would they if you were too clean. It starts with a simple reality. Your hygiene is a pyramid, and you sit at the top, gleaming behind layers of perfumes, powders, and rosewater rinse rituals. But that shine is propped up by dozens of hands that do the actual work. Your maids draw the bath, carry the hot water, fetch the herbs, prepare the clouts, boil your rags, wipe down your chamber pot, and yes, sometimes even scrub your bare feet. But their own feet? They're lucky if they get a bucket of cold water once a week. Your laundresses, for instance, handle things no queen should ever touch. They boil your soiled linens in a foul mixture of lye and ash, stirring with long wooden paddles as steam rises and bites their skin. Their hands are raw, their nails blackened, their lungs singed from years of breathing in hot, soapy vapour spiked with whatever stained your last gown. They work all day and sleep near the river or behind the kitchens where the smoke never stops and the rats don't flinch. They aren't perfumed, they aren't powdered, they're invisible, unless something goes missing or comes back not quite clean. And the bath attendants, you've never seen anyone haul water like them. Huge copper pots sloshing with near-boiling water carried up spiral staircases, leaving wet footprints in their wake. They fill the tub, wait outside the curtain, and when you're done, they dump the grey water into the courtyard gutter, where it mixes with horse dung, spoiled food, and the runoff from the privy. Then, once the tub is empty, they scrub it out by hand and start again for the next lady of the court. They don't bathe themselves, not in the same tub. That would be inappropriate, contaminating. So they go home dirty, always dirty, he saw. There's a disturbing hierarchy of dirt in your court. Queens are expected to smell like flowers and powdered ivory. Noble ladies, at the very least, should mask their scent with lavender or clove. Servants, they're expected to be dirty, not out of cruelty. Well, not just cruelty, but out of necessity. If a chambermaid showed up smelling like jasmine oil and fresh linen, people would whisper, "Is she getting above her station? Is she trying to seduce someone? Is she hiding a disease?" Yes, being too clean can be dangerous if you're a servant. Suspicion follows you, but being too dirty is just as bad. You've seen girls dismissed because their hands were too calloused, their breath too sour, their clothes beyond salvage. One cook's assistant was sent back to her village because she looked contagious, though no one actually checked. The court simply doesn't want to see the grime that supports it. Out of sight, out of mind. One of your maids, and Selma, a quiet girl with hands like leather, told you once that the lower servants bathe communally every few weeks in the river behind the chapel. Upstream from the tanners, but only just. They take turns scrubbing one another's backs with old brushes and animal fat soap. There's no privacy, no towels. If the weather is cold, they dry themselves with their own dresses and walk home shivering. but it's their only chance to feel human. You gave her a pouch of mint leaves after she told you that, not knowing what else to offer. She cried, and don't even get started on the boys who clean the garderobes. They are practically untouchable, by both social custom and literal choice. No one wants to be near someone who wades knee-deep into castle sewage, but without them, the whole illusion collapses. They don't get perfume, they don't get a smile, they get a coin and a stiff warning not to make eye contact. The scullery maids who scrub pots with sand and bitter herbs, the laundry girls who comb your underthings for lice, the stable hands who brush the horses while smelling worse than them, all of them wear your cleanliness like a burden. Your comfort comes at the cost of their sores and cracked skin and peeling nails, and they do it without question because that's how it works. You're the queen. They are the hands behind the curtain. But even among the servants, there's a hierarchy of hygiene. Your first maids, the ones who touch your skin, are kept cleaner than the rest. They have access to rosewater and spare cloths, sometimes even leftover soaps. Their hair is braided. Their hands are soft. They exist in your sphere. And so they must be presentable, if not for themselves, then for what it says about you. If your maid stinks, it reflects on your grace, but only that far. They must still know their place, always just clean enough to serve, never clean enough to be mistaken for anything more. It's the same with food. You eat honeyed meats and fresh fruit. They eat crusts and porridge, scraping what's left from your plates before feeding the scraps to the dogs. And even the dogs smell better than some of them. Not because they're cleaner, but because someone oils their fur and brushes them for show. Cleanliness is curated, assigned, maintained. Modern historians sometimes romanticize the downstairs staff, painting them as beloved confidants, cheeky sidekicks, or tragic heroines. But you see the truth. Most of your servants are quiet, tired, and perpetually unwashed. Not because they don't care, but because they don't have time, or water, or permission. And you, in your silk-lined chamber with perfumed hair and goat-fat creams, benefit from every second of their labour. Sometimes you wonder what it would feel like to trade places for a day. Just one. To scrub something instead of having it scrubbed for you. To earn the warmth of a bath instead of expecting it. To smell your own hands and not flinch. But that's not how it works. You're the queen, and your hygiene isn't yours. It belongs to the pyramid, built on backs bent low with filth and silence. You're standing still as three maids circle you like storm clouds, each one tugging, pinning, or adjusting some part of the towering monstrosity that is your royal gown. It's day 6 of wearing the same underdress, and it shows. Not visually, of course. On the surface, you appear immaculate, a floating tower of brocade and embroidery. But beneath the polished exterior, your gown is a chamber of horrors, a suffocating, scratchy cocoon of sweat, dust, and yesterday's soup that splashed on your hem during dinner and now smells faintly of onions and decay. Royal wardrobes are supposed to be magnificent, and they are. Technically, each gown is a marvel, hand-stitched, covered in pearls, lined with fur, woven with golden thread. But what no one talks about is that these gowns are also traps. They're heavy, some weighing more than your younger brother. They're stiff, lined with horsehair and canvas to keep the correct silhouette. And they are never washed. Not in the way you might imagine. Certainly not in water. Most haven't seen a bath since their creation. At best, they are brushed with stiff brooms, aired out on cold stone balconies, and beaten with bundles of herbs that release a fine layer of fragrant particles into the cloth and the air. That's not cleaning. That's medieval dry shampoo for fabric. The result? A royal wardrobe that smells like a damp cathedral floor and moves like an exorcism in slow motion. You have your everyday gowns, simpler, less bejeweled but no less oppressive, and your formal ones, which are so elaborate they practically require scaffolding. Some are so wide at the skirt you have to turn sideways to pass through doorways. One particular feast gown has sleeves so long and trailing they once caught fire near the hearth. You had to stand perfectly still while a maid slapped the flames out with a rolled-up tapestry. Each gown is custom-fitted, then endlessly repurposed. If one gets a hole, it's patched with a scrap of contrasting silk and called a fashionable flourish. If it starts to fray, they simply sew another decorative border over it. Eventually, what began as a royal purple robe of majesty becomes a quilt of cover-ups and improvisation, still regal on the outside but under the seams, a Frankenstein's monster of previous meals, sweat stains and mildew, and the worst part, you don't own half of it. Much of your wardrobe is technically property of the crown. It gets passed on, repurposed, handed down. Some Gowns belong to queens before you. One in particular smells so strongly of lavender and something slightly sour that you suspect it still carries the essence of its previous occupant. Your maid insists that scent lingers in fabric like memory in a cathedral wall. You're not sure if that's poetic or horrifying. The inner garments, your chemises, your stockings, your shifts, are what suffer the most. They absorb your sweat, your oils, the constant friction of movement. But washing them isn't routine. It's a production. Laundry is done only when absolutely necessary, because fine linen is expensive and too many washes ruin it, so your chemise becomes a second skin, slowly fusing to you over days of wear. By the end of the week, it stiffs, yellowed under the arms, and carries a faint outline of your torso in grime, but it still gets folded and set out for you the next day, because it's not too bad yet. You've tried swapping it out more often. The laundress smiled at you like you were adorable. "Of course, my lady," she said, "just as soon as we finish boiling last week's linen." That was 5 days ago. You haven't seen it since. You suspect it gave up in the fire. Footwear is another lie you're forced to tell. Your shoes, slippers made of velvet and fine leather, are beautiful, yes. They're also impossible. Designed for appearances, not support, they slip off at inopportune times, soak up puddles like a sponge, and offer zero insulation from cold stone floors. Your feet are blistered, your heels cracked, and the soft fabric is slowly darkening from the inside out. But you wear them, because nothing says royal composure like hobbling through court on rotting feet in jewel-encrusted agony. Even the accessories betray you. Gloves made of kid leather and lined with fur smell fine for a day or two, but once your hands start sweating, and they do, they become damp, breeding grounds for bacteria. You've taken to dousing them in scented powder before wearing them, which helps mask the sour scent that blooms around our fore. Rings dug into your swollen fingers. Necklaces leave green smudges on your skin. Corsets leave bruises, all in the name of elegance. And yet, you must be grateful. You are. After all, your gowns are the envy of every woman at court. When you glide into a hall, people stare. They whisper. They try to copy your style, sketch your hemline, and steal fabric swatches when you're not looking. You're a walking symbol of wealth, power, and unreachable grace. But you also smell like yesterday's meat pie and haven't sat comfortably in 3 years. There's an open debate among historians about whether medieval queens really suffered so much for fashion. Some argue that noblewomen could wear looser, more breathable garments in private. Others insist the pressure to appear immaculate at all times meant that even your nightgown came with embroidery and a bit of dried sweat. The truth is likely both. Moments of relief hidden between layers of expectation. Sometimes you fantasize about throwing off the layers, stepping into a plain linen robe, washing it daily in warm water scented with nothing but real soap, walking barefoot in grass instead of slippers soaked in chamber sweat. No pearls, no velvet, just clean, soft, breathable fabric. But then the door opens, the horns sound. Your name is called, and so you rise, adjust your sleeves, tug at the collar to shift the itch down your back, and float into the grand hall like a vision, wrapped in grandeur, stitched in filth. You kneel before what's claimed to be the femur of St. Margaret, encased in a golden reliquary shaped like a leg, and try not to inhale too deeply. The scent is complicated. A mix of melted beeswax, old incense, dried flowers, sweaty pilgrim, and something vaguely ecclesiastical, which is to say mould with a touch of guilt. You're told the relic purifies, that touching it with your bare hands can absolve sin, that just being near it is a blessing. But all you can think is it's dusty. Not symbolic dusty, not wholly dusty, but dusty, like it's been sitting in the back of a cupboard since the plague and only brought out now because you're here. You do your part, of course. You kneel. You bow. You press your forehead to the velvet-covered pedestal and murmur a prayer that is half real, half performance. Behind you, a line of noblewomen shuffle forward, each waiting for their moment to pretend they're overwhelmed by sanctity, and not, in fact, elbow deep in a cloud of ancient rot. They'll all return to their chambers claiming they felt warmth, or a tingling in their fingers, or the heavy soreness of divine presence. No one will mention the smell, not out loud. Relics are everywhere in the palace. Bones, teeth, scraps of cloth, splinters of wood said to be from the true cross. One nobleman swears he owns the preserved tongue of a martyred bishop, though it looks suspiciously like a dried-out sausage. These fragments are believed to hold divine power. They were paraded during feasts, carried through the streets during plagues, and displayed in chapels with enough candles to torch a small village. And everyone wants to be close to them, not just for piety, for protection, for prestige. If a queen keeps holy dirt beneath her pillow, surely she'll be favoured by heaven. If she walks barefoot through a garden sprinkled with the dust of a saint's skull, surely her child will be a prophet. It's faith, yes, but also branding. One of your most prized relics is a strip of wool said to have come from the Virgin Mary's own loom. It's sewn into a small pouch and pinned inside your corset, right next to your heart, where it itches like sin. You're told it wards off impure thoughts, though in your experience all it really does is collect sweat and turn slightly green by midsummer. Your maid replaces the pouch every year using fresh linen and sewing the relic into the lining with prayers and fingers crossed. She pretends not to notice the stains. Another court favourite is a vial of holy oil, said to have been drawn from the tomb of St. Oswin, though it smells distinctly like lamp grease. You're meant to anoint your forehead with it during times of spiritual trial, or, more practically, before dinner with the king's mother. It leaves a sticky sheen on your skin and stains your pillowcases, but again, this is about piety, not convenience. There's a belief in court that physical contact with relics can cure ailments. You've seen women press their infected fingers to the base of a reliquary and whisper desperate bargains to the saints. You've seen men clutch their stomachs and cry beside an enshrined tooth. You've even seen a monk slap a relic across a noble's forehead with the enthusiasm of someone trying to drive out a demon or a migraine. Did it work? Hard to say. He stopped crying, but that might have been out of sheer embarrassment. Some of the relics are fakes. Everyone knows it. There are too many original splinters of the true cross floating around to keep up the illusion, but no one dares question them, not out loud. You once heard a baron say, after a long night and too much wine, that half the relics in the chapel were likely pig bones. The next day he was sent on a diplomatic mission to a swamp-infested border town. Coincidence? Possibly, but more likely someone heard him and decided that kind of sacrilege was best steeped in leeches. Even the dust in these holy places is considered sacred. There's a nun in residence who sweeps the chapel corners into a jar each week and sprinkles the collected dust onto the chapel floor during important feast days. When you asked her why, she said solemnly, "So we all walk on the memory of the faithful." You nodded, even as your nose twitched. The memory of the faithful, it turns out, smells exactly like old socks and mildew. And then there's the idea of transference, that relics not only bless but absorb. You're told that sitting beside a saint's skull will take away your fear, that sleeping in a chamber near a martyr's preserved fingers will help you dream without nightmares. The truth? You slept beside St. Elred's jawbone for 3 nights and had the worst dreams of your life. One featured a bleeding duck with your father's voice. You haven't touched it since. Still, the expectation remains. As queen, your relationship to relics is part of your image. You are not just royal, you are wholly adjacent. Your hands are supposed to tremble reverently as you lift a reliquary. Your eyes should water with the presence of the divine. Your lips must brush the velvet-lined edge of a glass case like you're kissing heaven. And your smell? It must never overpower the sacred scent of beeswax, rose petals and old bones. So you douse yourself in powder, kneel slowly, and try not to let your knees creak as loudly as they always do. Historians sometimes suggest that medieval relic culture was more symbolic than literal, that the belief in a saint's toe was less about the toe and more about the sense of continuity with the divine. And sure, that makes sense, but you've held that toe, you've looked it in the eye, and you've thought with absolute certainty, I need to wash my hands immediately. But no one does. Because washing after touching a relic is frowned upon. The blessings could rinse away. The divine might take offence. So you smile, cross yourself, and smear a little more holy oil onto your wrists. Then you go back to your chambers and fight the urge to scrub your skin raw. Because here, even the dirt is sacred. Even the stink is revered. And even the queen is expected to pretend that a centuries-old fragment of some monk's elbow doesn't smell like death in a velvet sack. The public bathhouse stands at the edge of the town like a forgotten sibling, technically part of the community but rarely invited to family functions. You pass it once during a slow ceremonial procession, and the smell that drifts from its arched doorways is hard to categorise. It's a stew of steam, mildew, sweat, and something sharp and vaguely medicinal. The people inside look oddly joyful, bare arms gleaming, towels clutched modestly, laughter echoing off the tiled walls. Your attendants glance away quickly, noses lifted slightly, as if merely seeing it might stain your reputation. Because queens don't bathe in public. That's the rule. No matter how well appointed, no matter how many scented herbs float in the water, a public bath is for commoners. It's where peasants and tradespeople soak away their aches, where children splash and play, where washerwomen knead laundry beside stone basins and mutter gossip like prayers. For them, bathing is a communal ritual, a blend of hygiene, social hour and neighbourhood therapy. For you, it's a potential scandal. Instead, you're confined to your private tubs, if you're lucky enough to get one, and even then, only when all the stars align and your physician declares the act of bathing safe for your constitution. But the real reason you don't join the townspeople is because of purity, not just of body, but of class. The very idea of a queen's bare skin exposed to the same water as a butcher's apprentice is enough to send the court chaplain into fits. Never mind that you're all still human. The illusion of difference must be preserved. It hasn't always been this way. You've heard the stories, tales of earlier centuries when bathhouses were considered noble, even luxurious. When queens and kings bathed regularly in grand marble halls perfumed with sage and rose. Those days are gone now, washed away by the waves of religious reform and plague-born paranoia. The bathhouse became associated with immorality, disease, and the lower classes, and so, like lace cuffs or prayer beads, it was reassigned to the poor. But sometimes, late at night, you think about it. The public bath, the laughter, the warmth. You imagine slipping into the water without ceremony or an entourage, without a physician scowling nearby or a maid measuring the heat with the back of her hand. You imagine sinking into shared steam, your shoulders unburdened, your hair unpinned, your body real again. Not a symbol, not a canvas, just skin and bone and a little privacy. You wouldn't even need perfume, just soap, actual soap. The kind made from lard and ash and lye, crude sure, but cleansing. You'd lather until the film of courtly grime lifted away, the old powders, the lead paste, the sweat trapped beneath 3 layers of chemise. You'd scrub your heels until they didn't crack. You'd soak your wrists, still sticky from holy oil, and let the filth rise and drift off like mist. And when you stepped out, maybe you wouldn't smell like lavender or rose or saint's elbow, but maybe you'd smell like nothing and that would be enough. But reality is more complicated. When a foreign princess visits your court and mentions that she still bathes in public on feast days, the room goes very still. Someone coughs, a bishop crosses himself, she laughs, thinking she's made a charming confession, but the whispers begin as soon as she leaves. A danger to morality, they say, a bad influence. One lady in waiting wonders aloud if that's why her skin is so clear, witchcraft obviously. No one dares say it, but the underlying message is clear. If she bathes like a peasant, she is one. Even your ladies in waiting are split. Some look longingly at the idea of communal baths, less about mingling, more about actual hygiene. Others are terrified by it. What if you catch something, they ask. What if someone sees something? To them, the bathhouse is more than unsanitary. It's indecent. A slip of cloth, a too loud laugh, and suddenly you're a cautionary tale embroidered into next year's court tapestry. Still, curiosity itches at you. You ask your maid in a whisper if she's ever gone. She hesitates, then nods. Once, she says, long ago, before I came here. Her eyes soften. It was warm, and I was clean for a whole day. You don't press further. You can see in her face that she hasn't felt that way in years. There's a fringe group of healers who still advocate for public bathing, even for nobles. They argue that sweat carries toxins, that skin must be cleansed to keep the humours in balance. One radical physician in the Northern Territories has even opened a bathhouse just for noblewomen. But when word reaches court, the idea is ridiculed. Bathing? With strangers? In public? The Queen, they say, would never. And so you don't. You stick to your basins of rosewater, your dry cloths, your vinegar rinses. You dab and sponge and pray your scent never betrays you. Your baths are mostly ceremonial now. A warm cloth to the face before bed. A handmaid gently rubbing your feet while murmuring psalms. Clean enough to be respectable, not clean enough to relax. What's tragic is how everyone pretends it's better this way. The noble avoidance of water, the layers of powder and prayer, it's framed as elegance, decorum, spiritual strength. But you know the truth, the poor wash, the rich hide. It's not about cleanliness, it's about optics. A woman seen washing is a woman seen needing to wash, and queens, as the stories go, should need nothing. But deep down, in some unspoken place, you envy them, the women in the bathhouse. The laughter, the warmth, the ache of muscles softened by steam, the simple, honest freedom of being just another body in the water. You may never have it, but you think of it, often. You wake up to the sound of bells tolling and the distinct sharp tang of something rotting. It's faint at first, wafting in through the draughty shutters of your chamber like an unwanted guest. But it lingers, thickens, curves around your nose and refuses to leave. You sit up slowly, and immediately your joints protest, swollen and stiff like they've been soaked overnight in vinegar. That's when you remember you're due to see the royal physician today. No one looks forward to this. He arrives before midday, cloaked in layers of wool and heavy robes, despite the fact that it's midsummer and the room already feels like a kiln. He bows deeply, sniffs once, likely trying to detect imbalances, and launches into a monologue about your pulse, your colour, and the moistness of your tongue. You sit there, lips dry, fingers twitching, trying not to laugh as he frowns and says gravely, "Your spleen is protesting again." The physician's toolkit is an ominous box lined with bottles, bags, and dried bits of something. He brings out the remedies with theatrical flair, each more dubious than the last. Today's treat? A poultice made from mashed onion, pig lard, and crushed marigolds designed to draw out our heat from your joints. The smell alone makes your eyes water. And when it's applied to your knees with a spatula-like tool that looks better suited for churning butter, the warmth burns, not gently, not soothingly, but with the urgency of something that's probably not supposed to be on skin at all. Of course, this is considered cutting-edge medicine. You try to voice your concern. "Does it usually smell like this?" you ask, half-joking. The physician's expression turns reverent. "Yes, my lady." The odour proves its strength. You grit your teeth and pretend you're not becoming a human stew, but this is just the beginning. He also prescribes a tonic made from boiled leeches, mint, and a whisper of ground ivory. It's thick, brown, bitter. The kind of liquid that coats your teeth and settles in your stomach like wet wool. "For your internal balance," he explains. "Your bile is dominant, we must calm it." You nod solemnly, because that's what queens do, then discreetly spit half of it into a handkerchief the moment he turns round. There's a larger problem. Nobody really understands how the body works, at least not in a way that's helpful. Everything is filtered through the lens of the four humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. You've been told at various times that your mood, digestion, skin tone, and even your dreams are caused by an excess or deficiency of one or more of these mysterious substances. You've also been told that spicy food can cure melancholy, that laughter might cause swelling, and that menstrual blood must be counteracted by rubbing vinegar on your temples. So when the physician insists on placing a dead pigeon against your chest to draw out fever vapours, you don't argue. You lie still while a lifeless bird, plucked, partially gutted and reeking, rests on your collarbone like some cursed accessory. You're not even sure how it's supposed to work. You just know that once, a duchess refused the same treatment and died 2 weeks later. Not of the illness, probably, but definitely of reputation. It gets worse. When the pigeon treatment fails to make you feel more open to divine energy, your physician recommends a purgative, an herbal mixture designed to cleanse your bowels of wicked humours. You're escorted to your privy with the urgency of someone handling a lit torch, and while you're crouched on that freezing slab of stone, clutching your stomach and questioning your entire bloodline, your maid waits just outside, whispering prayers for your release. There is nothing sacred about it. Later, once the colour returns to your cheeks, possibly from sheer dehydration, you're given a little bag of dried earth. From the site of St. Hilda's last miracle, your physician says proudly, keep it close to the skin. You pin it to your shift. It smells like dust and maybe sheep, and if all else fails, bloodletting. The idea is simple: remove the bad blood, and the body will reset. The execution less so. You lie on a table while a man in stained robes makes a neat incision near your elbow. A ceramic bowl catches the drip, drip, drip of your supposed sins. You feel lightheaded. You pretend it's working. Everyone pretends it's working. It must be working, because if it isn't, what's left? Your physicians aren't cruel, just at all wrong. Wrong in the way that people can be when they're doing their best with terrible information. They've read ancient texts, they've seen saints carved into cathedral walls clutching herbal sachets and offering cryptic smiles. They believe in balance, in purity, in the idea that every illness has a spiritual root. When you broke out in boils after using that deer marrow mask, your doctor didn't blame the deer, he blamed your ambition, man. Of course there are fringe healers, women in the woods, old midwives who speak in riddles and stir pots over smoky fires. They know about herbs, real herbs, like feverfew, comfrey, calendula, but associating with them is dangerous. Witchcraft, they whisper. Unnatural remedies. You once saw a girl whipped for carrying a sachet of dried thyme. They said it was a charm. She said it was for her mother's aching joints. The truth didn't matter. Still, your own maid sneaks in a few things, an herb-soaked cloth here, a sprig of rosemary tucked into your sleeves, a paste of honey and ground nettle for your inflamed hands. It helps more than the pigeon ever did, but she doesn't take credit. She just nods and says, "It's the Queen's strength." You both know better. Some historians like to romanticize medieval medicine. They say it was rooted in balance, in nature, in listening to the body. And sure, there's something lovely about the idea of a world where doctors prescribe music and warm baths. But that's not your life. Your life is dead animals, spicy wine enemas, and oil that smells like dying herbs and spoiled butter. By the end of the day, you're exhausted. Your skin burns from poultices. Your stomach churns from tonics. Your arm still weeps slightly from the incision. But the court physician beams and declares you much improved. You nod because it's easier. Then you crawl into bed, wrap your aching limbs in layers of wool and hope, deeply, earnestly, that your body can heal in spite of all the help. Because in this world, medicine doesn't soothe, it tests your will. It begins, as most disasters in your life tend to, with a knock at the chamber door and someone whispering the words, "The Queen's time is near." You don't panic. That came weeks ago in private, when the midwife placed a wrinkled hand on your abdomen and declared you ripe for labour any day now. You've had a dull ache in your back for a week. Your ankles have swollen to the size of roasted pheasants, and the baby has been turning inside you like a restless saint trying to escape a tomb. But now that it's official, now that everyone knows, everything changes. The royal birth chamber becomes a flurry of movement. Curtains are drawn tight, doors are barred, mirrors are covered, male courtiers are banned entirely. Light is limited to a few flickering candles, and suddenly the room feels like a cave dressed in velvet. It's meant to be sacred, private, mystical. What it feels like is hot, suffocating, and deeply unhygienic. The air grows thick with incense, not because anyone particularly wants to please the Lord, but because incense is the only thing standing between your nose and the unrelenting funk of sweat, tallow, and damp fabric. And then the attendants arrive. The midwife, of course, leads the charge, grey-haired, tight-lipped, and carrying a satchel that smells like boiled herbs and old secrets. Behind her come a procession of women, your ladies-in-waiting, a pair of wet nurses, a priest who's reluctantly shooed to the farthest corner, and a collection of helpers whose only real purpose seems to be standing around and murmuring about signs and omens. One brings you a charm made from baked dough and horsehair. Another, a small saint medallion to clutch between contractions. You accept them both. Why not? At this point you'll try anything. The royal physician arrives, too late and too smug, holding a leather-bound notebook he never actually opens. He lingers awkwardly at the edge of the room, only consulted when someone remembers they're supposed to be consulting him. You watch him slowly back away when the midwife starts giving orders. You're grateful for that. This is women's business, and none of it is elegant. You're placed on a bed, no lying on your back like in the paintings. This is not a poised, restful posture. This is squatting, knees pulled up, legs spread, body trembling while maids brace your shoulders. There's no medication, no anaesthesia, not even wine. You asked for wine. The priest said no. So now you clutch a damp rag between your teeth and focus on not cursing loudly enough to be immortalised in royal records. The pain is indescribable. It comes in waves, then cliffs. Your body clenches and groans and tears itself open from the inside while everyone around you murmurs how strong you are and how blessed this moment is. You want to bless someone with a candlestick. Blood follows. So much blood. You hear someone whisper that it's normal. You see a maid go pale and quietly leave the room. You feel the warm gush under you, the stickiness crawling up your thighs. The midwife mutters something to herself, her hands working quickly between your legs. You think you might faint. You don't. You're a queen. You don't get that luxury. When the baby finally comes, it's not a quiet moment. There's a shriek, sharp and sudden, followed by a ragged cheer. You're barely conscious. your head swimming in exhaustion and loss. The child is lifted, squirming, red, more creature than cherub. Someone wraps it in a swaddle embroidered with your house sigil. You're asked if you want to hold it. You nod. They place the child in your arms, and for a moment, a brief flickering moment, you forget the smell, the blood, the agony. You just breathe shallow and broken and feel something that might be relief or shock. It's hard to tell. Then someone takes the child again for inspection. Because of course the royal heir must be weighed, examined, anointed, paraded. You've barely had time to blink. Now comes the clean-up, which is somehow worse than the birth itself. You're not moved. You're wiped down with cloths, rough linen soaked in vinegar and tepid water. Your thighs sting, your back aches, your belly feels like a gutted sack. The afterbirth is examined with the seriousness of an augury. One woman makes a comment about the colour, another clutches a rosary. You hear them debating whether it's a good omen or bad. You don't care, you want to sleep. The sheets are stripped, soaked in blood, mucus and other things you'd rather not name. The mattress is ruined, but they flip it anyway. The floor is scrubbed, but not well. A maid sprinkles herbs on it, then crushes them with her bare feet as she moves about. A soft, sweet stink rises. Mint, lavender, blood. The scent of survival, see? Dressed up for court. You are given a fresh shift, still damp from rushed laundering, and laid back against new pillows. A poultice is placed against your lower belly, heavy and warm, meant to draw out the weakness. You lie there limp as a doll while women drift in and out of the chamber whispering congratulations and talking about godmothers. No one offers you water. Eventually someone hands you a small bowl of broth, and you sip it while staring at the curtains and wondering how you're still alive. And let's not forget, you're expected to look radiant. By tomorrow you'll be expected to receive visitors, smile, accept gifts, pose with your newborn wrapped in royal colours. You'll still be bleeding, clots as large as goose eggs slipping quietly into your linens. You'll still be cramping, but your face will be powdered, your lips stained. Your gown carefully draped to hide the swollen abdomen still working its way back to normal. Historians argue about the dangers of childbirth for queens. Yes, you had attendants, resources, better nutrition, but you also had the crushing pressure of producing heirs, of delivering under scrutiny, of performing. And if something went wrong, if you screamed too loud, bled too long, failed to deliver a boy, you didn't just suffer. You failed a kingdom. You're lucky this time. The baby is healthy. You're still breathing. The priest declares it a miracle. You think it's a statistical anomaly, but you nod. Tomorrow you'll be celebrated, the queen who brought forth life, the vessel of divine continuity, the Holy Mother. But tonight, you lie still on a blood-stained mattress, legs trembling, barely cleaned, barely clothed, with the taste of vinegar in your mouth and the scent of your own body thick in the air. And you survive, because that's what queens do. A month later, you still haven't left your chamber, not because you're bedridden, though truthfully sitting down without wincing still takes effort, but because you're under the ancient ritual of churching, a confinement period during which new mothers are meant to stay indoors and avoid all things holy, social, or otherwise visible. They say it's for your protection. They say it gives your body time to heal and your soul time to purify. But what it feels like is exile, cushioned, perfumed, velvet-draped exile. The chamber is stuffy. You've opened the window slats twice, both times scolded. A chill might set into your bones, they say. Or worse, your womb. So the shutters stay closed, and the air inside goes thick, scented with burnt herbs, candle wax, and the perpetual sourness of a body recovering in secret. No one talks about the bleeding, the clots, the damp cloths changed by your maids in near silence. Everyone just pretends the queen is glowing in private, resting like a holy relic. Your body, though, is far from holy. Your belly hangs low, soft and loose, the skin marked by thin, angry lines. Your breasts are sore, leaking, and alternately engorged or oddly deflated, depending on how recently the wet nurse has fed the child. You wear a support bodice under your shift to hide the sagging. It helps a little, but nothing can hide the feel, the fermented blend of milk, sweat and old blood that no amount of rosewater seems to conquer. You long for a bath, a real one. Hot water deep enough to soak in, to wash away everything, the pain, the exhaustion, the sourness of being half woman, half symbol. But full immersion is forbidden during your confinement. The midwife says it might open your womb again. You could bleed out, she warns, holding a damp rag to your face like a consolation prize. So instead, you endure endless sponge baths and oil rubs that only ever make you feel stickier. This period of confinement is officially a spiritual cleansing. After childbirth, you're considered temporarily impure, not sinful exactly, just touched. Too close to death, too soaked in blood and bodily mysteries to walk among the innocent. So you wait. You wait for the churching ceremony where you'll be blessed and re-welcomed into the world like a wayward ghost who's finally dried out. Meanwhile, visitors trickle in. Always women, always soft-voiced. They bring gossip, gifts, sweetmeats you can barely stomach. One duchess gifts you a carved ivory comb for the baby's hair. Another hands you a rosary made from dried rose petals pressed into beads. You thank them all. Smile when expected. Nod as they speculate about the baby's resemblance to the king. Such strong brows, never mentioning that the child still mostly looks like a pink raisin with hiccups. The baby is presented to you twice a day. The rest of the time, it's swaddled and handled by wet nurses, cradled by women whose names you forget but whose competence you cling to. When you do hold the baby, it smells of milk, wool, and faintly of damp parchment. You rock it, whisper lullabies passed down from queens who bled before you, and feel, sometimes briefly, something like connection. Other times, just obligation. There's an ongoing debate in whispers. Should the queen breastfeed? Some say yes, it's natural, noble, biblical. Others argue it's unbecoming, that it saps your strength, that it interferes with fertility. And fertility, of course, is your most sacred duty. You've already been asked when you'll be ready to try again. Your thighs are still sore, your womb still leaks, and yet the kingdom wants another heir, preferably male, preferably soon. The wet nurses, for their part, are robust women with cracked nipples and iron constitutions. They know this baby better than you. They coo at it, bounce it, inspect its stools like scholars reading prophecy. You're grateful for them, but also vaguely jealous. They get to know the baby while you recover behind a curtain of incense and quiet suffering. One day, a servant brings you a mirror. You haven't seen your reflection since before the birth. You hesitate, then look. Your face is pale, lips dry. Your eyes have dark circles beneath them, giving you the haunted look of a minor saint or a particularly overworked nun. Your hair, once carefully curled and perfumed each day, now hangs limp and greasy. The gown you wear is loose, meant for nursing, but the looseness does little to flatter. You look mortal, and you're not supposed to. Queens are supposed to emerge from childbirth radiant, transcendent, elevated by the divine act of giving life, but you feel like you've been dragged backward through a hedge, and then polished just enough to fool the blind. You set the mirror down and don't ask for it again. The chamber gets quieter each day. The excitement fades. The duchesses stop visiting. Even the nurses grow more brisk, more distant. The baby no longer draws gasps of delight, only sighs and questions about teething. You become once again a woman in waiting, waiting for your body to return to some version of itself, waiting to be allowed outside, waiting for your ceremonial cleansing, like a penitent accused of some unnamed crime. Finally, the day comes. You are dressed in fresh linen and led barefoot to the chapel. Your hair is braided, your gown is pale blue. A colour of humility, you kneel at the altar, still sore, still faintly bleeding, and receive a blessing meant to wash away the stain of birth. The priest speaks of grace, of renewal, of sacred duty. You nod, eyes low, feeling neither pure nor impure, just tired. When it's over, you rise. Applause follows. Soft, polite, ceremonial, you are back, you are cleansed. You're allowed to exist in public again. You can attend mass, host court, be touched, but your body still aches, your belly still sags. Your spirit, though no one asks, is thin as parchment. And though no one will say it out loud, every eye on you now carries the question, when will you give the kingdom another child? You're finally allowed back into public life, but it doesn't feel like a homecoming. It feels like stepping back onto a stage mid-performance, still clutching your script with hands that haven't stopped shaking. The court greets you with rehearsed joy. Nobles bow, ladies curtsy, courtiers offer flowers and praise. Everyone tells you how radiant you look, how motherhood has softened your features, how your recovery was surely touched by the divine favour. You nod and smile and sip spiced wine through cracked lips. No one mentions that your gait is stiff, or that you sat down too slowly, or that your smile slips just a little whenever someone asks about the baby's feeding schedule. Back at court, everything smells sharper than before, or maybe you're just more sensitive now. The dining hall is a fog of roasted meat, tallow smoke and stale breath. The corridors are laced with old incense and unwashed velvet. Even the king's private chamber smells stronger, faintly of sweat, old wine, and that spicy cologne he insists on dabbing beneath his beard. You try not to flinch. The court, after all, is where appearances matter more than your comfort. And hygiene is still a careful illusion. You're expected to return to your full ceremonial duties within a week. That means hours in the throne room, accepting petitions from men who bow low but keep their eyes locked on your chest, where your breasts, still swollen from lactation, are carefully bound and padded beneath your gown. The binding itch. The linen sticks to your skin, but loosening them would cause leakage, and heaven forbid a queen stains her bodice in front of the Bishop of Canterbury. So you endure. Of course you do. You're also expected to resume religious life with vigour. That means early morning mass in the chapel, kneeling on cold stone for what feels like eternity while the priest drones on about the purity of Mary. You try to ignore the dull ache in your hips, the way your back seizes when you stand. You try not to remember that Mary's birth experience was supposedly painless and celestial, while yours involved swearing, blood, and the very real possibility of dying in a puddle of your own fluids. Still you rise when expected. You pray when expected. You nod gravely when a monk hands you a blessed relic and tells you that childbirth has made you holier. Holier and somehow filthier. There's a paradox at play here that no one seems to want to name. You've just done the most essential thing a queen can do, produce an heir, and yet everything about your body is now treated like a contamination. You're no longer referred to as the fairest in court circles. Instead, they say noble, wit and gracious, strong, all polite synonyms for used. Even your gowns reflect the shift. Gone are the vibrant jewel tones and daring necklines. Now you're draped in softer colours, modest cuts, pale blues, creams, gentle browns, Virgin Mary adjacent, Mother of God cosplay. You no longer dress to dazzle, you dress to reassure, to symbolise stability. Your body is a symbol of continuity, not seduction. Not anymore. Your ladies, meanwhile, carry on as if nothing has changed. They still whisper scandal and perfume their gloves and pretend that hygiene is as simple as rubbing citrus oil on your armpits and not thinking too hard about what's growing in your hair. You envy their ignorance. You envy their unbroken bodies, their illusions. You used to share those illusions. Now you know what hides beneath them. Blood, clots, exhaustion, the feeling of tearing open from the inside. But you can't say any of that out loud. Queens are supposed to be discreet about suffering. Pain, after all, is not part of court etiquette. And then comes the real insult. Your return to the royal bed. No one says it outright, of course. But your maid casually lays out your finest shift one evening. A soft blue one, scented with crushed violets and sewn with tiny pearls along the neckline. The king sends word that he'll be retiring early. A fire is lit in your chamber, the bed warmed with hot stones. You know what this means, your body barely healed, still leaking faintly, still sore in places you pretend not to notice, is expected to be ready. The physician has already declared you restored to balance. The midwife, when asked, said something about your hips being resettled. That's enough. That's all that's needed to make you available again. The first time you lie with the king post-childbirth, everything feels slightly wrong. Your limbs don't quite fit the same way. Your body's rhythms have changed. You tense without meaning to. You do your best to be gracious, to be receptive, to moan at the appropriate time. You do not cry, you save that for later, when you are alone and washing with a cloth that smells faintly of wine vinegar and defeat. Afterwards, you are praised for your fortitude. The king sleeps. You lie awake, stomach cramping, waiting for the nurse to bring the baby back to be fed or held or paraded before a midnight guest. Sometimes you wonder if the child even knows who you are. You haven't held it properly in days. Historians often debate the extent of a queen's power. Was she a figurehead, or did she wield influence from behind the throne? They rarely ask the more intimate question: how much of her life was her own? The answer, you suspect, would be something between just enough to survive and barely any at all. Your scent changes. You notice it before anyone else, not because you smell worse, but because your skin no longer reacts to perfume the same way. Lavender makes you nauseous, clove oil burns, the rosewater you once adored now reminds you of the linen soaked during childbirth. You start using plain water, sometimes just cool cloths. It's not ideal, but it feels like a small rebellion. There is talk already of another pregnancy. Not too soon, the council says, but not too late. As if your womb is a seasonal crop they must rotate. They'll give you a few more months, just enough to catch your breath, then begin again. Because this is what queens do. Bear, recover, smile, repeat. So you walk the halls again, powdered, laced, scented, smiling. You accept compliments on your glowing complexion, knowing it's mostly lead paste and will flake off by dinner. You entertain guests, bless infants, touch relics. You sit beside the king at feasts, nodding, as he boasts about your strength and beauty, while your mind wanders to the basin in your chamber, the cracked soapstone dish, the plain linen shift drying near the hearth. You've returned, but you haven't really come back. Because once you've given birth in a chamber thick with incense and whispers, once your body has torn and bled and been wrapped in silk to be displayed like a miracle, you don't come back the same. And no one really wants you to. The longer you live in court, the more you realise that rot isn't just found in the rushes or the refuse pits. It seeps into people, into routines, beliefs, and expectations so long unexamined they've begun to fester. You see it in the way the nobility speaks of cleanliness as if it were a luxury, not a necessity. In how the priests preach purity but never once scrub their own robes. In how your own body, the queen's body, is expected to carry the weight of the kingdom and never once buckle under its smell. By now, you've become something of an expert at navigating the endless dance of appearances. You know how to time your face washing so your skin looks dewy but not shiny. You know how many drops of rosewater it takes to freshen a chamber without setting off someone's allergies. You've mastered the art of reapplying powder discreetly, even mid-feast, without letting the room see the dark circles that still cling to your eyes like bruises from another life. And yet, despite your best efforts, you're constantly betrayed by the body you inhabit. Your hair refuses to behave. Days between washings, it begins to mat at the nape of your neck, slick with oil and caught in the strings of your headdress. Your teeth ache from a mouthwash made of vinegar and burnt rosemary stems. Your feet, tucked daily into damp slippers that never fully dry, have begun to peel in places, the skin raw and tender. You don't dare speak of it. The last noble woman who complained of such common afflictions was quietly retired to a country estate, officially for rest, unofficially for being too human. Even your scent has started to shift again. You smell yourself before others do. A hint of something sour under your arms, a musky depth along your neckline, behind your ears. You try everything, lemon balm, crushed mint, sage tucked into the folds of your shift. Nothing holds for long. The heat of your body, intensified by the heavy fabrics and tight corsets, seems to cook every aroma into something slightly unpleasant. You begin to fear it's not what you put on your skin that's the problem, but what's beneath it. The palace's expectations don't change. No one wants a clean queen. They want the idea of a clean queen, one who smells like virtue, who glides rather than walks, who never perspires, never ages, never defecates. But you, a living organism of sweat and bile and fading patience, know better. There's an old superstition in court that queens should never be seen tending to themselves. A true monarch is so elevated, so blessed. She simply is beautiful, without effort, without care. This means your grooming must be done in secret, or else made to look accidental. A comb dropped near a mirror, a cloth dabbed against your brow in the guise of modesty. God forbid anyone catches you plucking stray hairs from your chin by candlelight. You once caught a glimpse of yourself doing just that, in a silver-backed mirror. The flickering light, the shape of your body hunched over, the tired set of your mouth. It didn't look like a queen. It looked like a woman trying to keep herself from falling apart one stray eyebrow at a time. Of course, you are not alone in this absurd ballet. The other ladies of court are equally bound by the tyranny of invisible hygiene. You watch them closely. One has started tinting her cheeks with crushed beetles, though she claims it's the flush of virtue. Another swears by a mixture of pigeon droppings and goat milk to keep her skin pale and youthful. The results are uneven, but everyone pretends not to notice. After all, you must maintain the illusion of divine cleanliness, no matter what it costs. And then there's the ritual of night. The royal nighttime routine, equal parts superstition and self-preservation. Your maid prepares a foot bath, warm and laced with chamomile. She scrubs your soles gently, though both of you know it won't undo the damage of standing in damp slippers for 14 hours. Then she rubs a balm into your skin, made of beeswax, poppy oil and crushed herbs. It smells faintly of mouldy honey. You pretend it's luxurious. Your hair is unbraided and combed with a carved bone pick, though by this point it's so tangled at the roots that small nesters of lint and hair powder fall out in clumps. You don't flinch anymore. You just close your eyes and endure it. She wipes down your arms and neck with cloth soaked in floral tincture. It cools you slightly, but the residue leaves your skin sticky. Then she helps you into your night shift, already stiff from previous nights of sweat, and tucks you into bed like a child. The sheets are clean tonight. That's a luxury. Often, they're just turned, not changed. You try not to think about how many nights you've slept in the same linen, the scent of your own body growing stronger with each turn. But tonight, they smell faintly of sun and lavender. You smile. A small win. Just as you're drifting off, you hear rats in the walls again. They've returned to their nightly skittering. Sometimes, if you wake suddenly, you see one dart across the floor. You're used to it now. Queens don't scream over vermin. Besides, at least the rats are honest about their filth. The humans in court, they hide theirs behind lace. You think sometimes about the future, about what your daughters will inherit. If they'll know that royal life is less about grandeur and more about mastering the art of quiet discomfort. If they'll be allowed to bathe without scandal. If one day someone will invent a way to truly be clean. Until then, you will keep up the performance. You'll wear the powdered gowns. You'll hold the scented handkerchiefs. You'll endure the oaths of beauty and grace, and inside you'll know the truth. Your body is never truly clean. Not in this world, but your composure, spotless. They bring the relics out again, because of course they do. Another outbreak, another parade of dusty bones and hopeful whispers. This time it's a wasting sickness, sweeping through the villages. Aches, fevers, mysterious boils. No one's calling it the plague yet, but the air is shifting. You can feel it in the sudden surge of incense in the corridors, the tightening of the servants' faces, the sharp increase in prayers muttered under breath between spoonfuls of soup. Fear smells different than dirt, sharper, more acrid. You know the difference by now. As queen, you're expected to model faith, not fear. You stand at the head of candlelit processions, holding a reliquary that may or may not contain a saint's thumb. You smile faintly. You kneel at altars. You let a bishop sprinkle you with holy water while your inner thighs itch with heat rash, and your bodice cuts into your ribs like an accusation. No one speaks of contagion, not openly, not yet. They speak instead of cleansing, of divine testing, which is rich considering no one's washed the hallway rushes in a month and the royal physician still believes bad smells are what cause disease, not the rats nesting in the granary. You've seen this before. You were younger then, not queen yet. You remember the blood under fingernails, the scent of sour fever, the way people stopped holding hands or sharing spoons. You remember the silence in rooms after someone coughed too hard. And now it's happening again, but this time you are the figurehead, the symbol of calm, a walking smiling mask stretched over fatigue and dread. Hygiene becomes ceremonial again. Chamber pots are emptied more often. Soap, previously reserved for feast days and noble births, suddenly makes a fashionable return. But only for the visible. You're given a fresh bar, lemon-scented and wrapped in linen like a newborn. You sniff it and feel the brief thrill of something clean. You ask if more is available. For the servants, the wet nurses, the laundresses. You're told supplies are limited. Let the queen have it, they say. She must set the tone. So you lather it between your palms, watching the suds form like something magical. You scrub your wrists, your neck, the space behind your ears. Your skin drinks it in. For a moment, you feel human. Then the maid dries you with a towel that smells of mildew, and the spell is broken. Outside, peasants are being ordered to clean their doorsteps with wine vinegar and sweep the gutters with holy brooms, sprigs of rosemary tied with red string. Within the palace, the approach is more symbolic. New herbs scattered over the rushes, more relics carried through rooms like air fresheners. A priest tapes a charm to your bedpost to ward off the black air. No one touches your bedsheets with actual water. The King's Council meets every morning to discuss the situation. You're not invited, of course, but you hear the murmurs afterward. how they're blaming the fishermen or the grain shipments or the travelling merchants. No one blames the fleas, not yet. A rat scuttles through the garden during your walk, bold as ever. You point, no one reacts. They give you a new perfume, a gift from a foreign court, a blend of clove, nutmeg, and what you're told is dragon's blood resin. It's strong, overpowering, you wear it like armour. When you enter a room, it arrives before you. When you leave, it lingers like a ghost. You know the real reason for it. If you reek of spice and wealth and holy oils, people will feel reassured. They won't think about the sick. They'll think about order, about divinely scented queens who could never get sick themselves. But behind closed doors, you're scrubbing your hands raw. Not because anyone told you to, just instinct. Something in your bones says, clean it off. So you do. You scrub until the skin flakes. Then you dust yourself with rice powder to hide the redness. The cycle begins again. People begin to vanish from court, quietly, a steward's wife, a kitchen boy, a scribe who handled too many scrolls from a certain port city. You're told they're resting elsewhere. You know better. You send an extra pouch of herbs to the nursemaids. You pretend it will help. One night a maid faints in your chamber. She's pale, shaking, drenched in sweat. The others panic, then freeze. No one wants to be the first to touch her. Finally, you kneel beside her yourself. You take her hand. It's burning. She tries to speak. You hush her. You call for water. Real water, not wine or oil. When it comes, you bathe her forehead yourself. She survives the night. The next morning, half the court treats you like a miracle worker. The other half avoids you entirely. The idea of cleanliness mutates again. Not physical this time, spiritual. A clean soul, they say, will survive. A queen who prays enough, fasts enough, performs penance will be spared. You see nobles whipping themselves in the cloisters. You hear of women eating only onions for a week. You nod when someone suggests hanging garlic in the nursery. You know it won't help. But people need to feel clean. You think about the older queens, the ones before you. How they survived or didn't. Some died of fever, some of childbirth. One was simply found curled in bed, blood at her nose, with a rosary tangled in her fingers. They all performed the rituals. They all did what was expected. Still, they died. And yet, you carry on. You wipe your skin with vinegar-soaked cloths. You refuse to wear the same shift 2 days in a row. You ban incense from your chamber, claiming it worsens your headaches, though really you just want to smell something real. You replace it with lavender and mint, crushed by hand each morning. You light beeswax candles because they smoke less. You demand the rushes be changed weekly. People protest, you stare them down, it happens. You stop kissing relics, you stop pretending, you are the queen. You will not be clean in the way they expect, but you will be real, and maybe that will save you. Or maybe it won't. But at least when the dust settles, when the bells stop tolling and the whispers fade, you'll know you didn't float above the filth. You stood in it, knew it, anyway, and for once that feels like enough. And so, here you are, cleaner than most, filthier than all would admit, and somehow still breathing. You've survived childbirth without soap, court life without deodorant, and medicine without reason. You've endured rot disguised as routine and rituals disguised as relief. The powdered gowns, the vinegar baths, the holy elbow bones, they never did save you. But you never needed saving, did you? You see now that the stink wasn't just in the rushes, it was in the expectations, the pageantry. The way every corner of your body, every secretion, every ache was either ignored, sanctified, or shamed. And yet you moved through it, laced up and powdered down, covered in silken secrets. You held your breath when required. You smiled through itching skin and abscesses no one dared name. If you've learned anything in this long sour-scented journey, it's this. The illusion of purity is often more important than the truth of hygiene. And for queens, truth rarely matters. Only the legend. Only the idea of you draped in brocade, perfumed like divinity, untouchable, unknowable. But in the dark, between processions and pageants, you scratch, you clean yourself in silence, you look in the mirror and see the grime behind your eyes, and you live, day after day, stinking, sweating, surviving. Maybe that's the real miracle. So next time someone says they wish they could be a medieval queen, let them know the truth. Yes, the crown sparkles. Yes, the throne is velvet. But the bed is crawling, the soap is lye, and the air always, always smells like a mix of tallow, rosewater and denial. Sleep tight, and maybe wipe your feet before bed.